Good evening and welcome to the November 14th, no, November 28th, sorry, we had the wrong date here, November 28th, 2022 meeting of the Planning Board of the Town of Chatham. My name is Catherine Halpern. I'm Chair of the Planning Board of the Town of Chatham, and this meeting is being conducted in a hybrid format, and I'll read you a few points regarding that in just a moment. Also, please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. And if anyone is recording the meeting, could you please notify us? It's all right to record the meeting, but you do need to notify us. I'll give everyone a few seconds in case you're muted and you're connected remotely by phone or computer. All right, so a few points on our hybrid format. This meeting of the Chatham Planning Board is being conducted both in person and via remote participation in accordance with Section 20 of Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and shall afford adequate alternative means of public access via Microsoft Teams by calling the phone number 508-945-4410. That's 1-508-945-4410, and the conference ID number is 273-735-095-39#. That's 273-735-095-39#. Or as I mentioned, you can join the meeting online using Microsoft Teams through the link that is in the agenda that's posted on our town website. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access, and as I mentioned, we'll post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. In accordance with town policy, the public can speak to any issue or business item that is on the agenda during the meeting when recognized by the chair. So let's go to our first agenda item, and I'll just explain that from 4 to 5:30, we'll be having a working session of the Planning Board on long-range planning, and we will be discussing the West Chatham Neighborhood Center proposed draft zoning bylaw amendment tonight. The board will end its discussions maybe around 10 minutes after 5, and we'll be able to have some public comment. Just due to the time, I'm going to ask the public to restrict your comments to 3 minutes. And also, the treatment of the runway protection zone is not specifically on the board's agenda tonight, although we will be mentioning it, but just a reminder to the board and the public that in considering the runway protection zone in regards to our West Chatham zoning initiative, we can only discuss land use matters. All other considerations are outside of the purview of the planning board. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that. So let's begin by our long-range planning discussion. We've received a summary prepared by Katie Donovan and Gloria McPherson of Community Development Department. Last meeting, the November 14th meeting, we did review the proposed zoning language to acknowledge and address the runway protection zone, and the board agreed that the next step would be to have some review by town council of the proposed language in the draft bylaw. We have not yet heard from town council, so considering that, we thought we would move on to some of the other open issues regarding the West Chatham Neighborhood Center draft zoning bylaw. And those are, I'll read them quickly, and then we can start with the first one. We do want to reconsider the district boundaries. We also want to consider housing density and also road and abutter setbacks, and a couple of other questions that the planning board still left open was the maximum building facade width, whether that should be reduced or whether we should leave it at 75 feet for buildings that are on Route 28. And then also whether to afford an extra half story, whether that should be allowed when affordable housing is provided. and whether to require commercial uses in the front 30 feet of a building's first floor along Route 28. So that's just a very brief summary of some of the open issues on the draft that the board has reviewed from Cape Cod Commission. So why don't we start with a consideration of the district boundaries? That is a rather major issue. Staff has provided us with 3 different maps showing several options, and also have reminded us that at the last meeting, Bob Dubus suggested that we look at extending the boundary to the east up to White Pond Road. And so I might ask Katie or Gloria, would you like to summarize the 3 versions that you've provided for the board just briefly? And then we can discuss what the options are about the boundaries for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So up on the screen is the original, or the project boundaries as we discussed a few weeks back. I believe that at our last meeting, Bob Dubus had suggested that we increase the West Chatham Neighborhood Center by, let me just scroll down, by increasing the boundaries down further, and
From Weldon to White Pond.
right, from Weldon to White Pond Road. And during that discussion, it was decided that board members would actually take a ride through that area to see if that is something that they felt. Bob?
Katie, I don't want to interrupt, but my idea was to go to Waverlin on the south side, because there's 2 office buildings directly just before Waverlin, and it would seem a shame to take those out of the equation, because they do have apartments above them.
Okay, so that would be in this area here where the,
Correct.
right, so it would be increased as Bob is proposing.
Yeah, and those
To include
are
this area
single,
here.
those are single lots for those buildings. They don't go, they're not deep lots.
Okay,
Yeah, I think you have to go to, do you have a map of option 2? I think option 2 includes the properties we just discussed. And then
Yes.
option 3, they don't?
No, they
Option 2
don't.
doesn't include that?
option 2 does not, no, it's
Okay.
actually,
These 2, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
And like I said, they're just single lots. They're not,
Okay.
Between the 2 right on 28.
Correct. Correct.
Just,
Oh,
you mean just the 2 on 28?
yes, those are office buildings and can be,
Okay.
at some other point, could be converted into whatever. So I think it would be prudent to include them. And then from there on that side of the street is residential.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're proposing to even go further east than than the maps that we have right in front of us?
Yes,
Yeah.
just the 2 buildings, include the 2 buildings.
Okay,
They're professional buildings.
okay,
so basically right where the pointer is, where the hand is on the screen.
Correct.
Okay.
okay, got it.
And then option 3, we provided as kind of food for thought for the board. If the board felt that increasing the neighborhood center zoning would allow for too much mixed use and too much density beyond what we had originally discussed, we had thought that we could propose another area that would allow for increased residential density only, not necessarily mixed-use density, as would be allowed in the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, but that would allow for increased residential density only. And so that was just something that we wanted to bring up to the board as well for consideration, because we understand what Mr. Dubus's thoughts are. It's just a question about whether or not we want to allow for the mixed-use density all along that area, as well as the increased residential density. And then Gloria would like to address that as well.
Just to build off of what Katie said, I think that it's not just adding a commercial component, but if you, and we'll walk you through it on Google Maps, but once you pass Weldon, there's a fundamentally different character to how the buildings relate to the street. Things are smaller, they're more spread out, they're just not as intensely focused on the street like you would typically see in a neighborhood center. And I think that giving it the same redevelopment standards as the West Chatham Neighborhood Center would kind of degrade that residential quality that's already there and that's so important, according to the local comprehensive plan, to keep between the village centers.
Except,
The,
Yes,
the,
go
the, the idea of that was, there's not very much land to be developed in the West Chatham corridor. This would give you a chance to put extra buildings up front, which back in the day, there used to be buildings up front and buildings in the back. So the change was that the buildings disappeared. That's why if you notice on going up 28 across from the motel, the Chatham Motel, that there's this little cutout. That was a parking area for a store that used to be there long ago. So the idea, if you notice that the lots are long and lean, that is somewhere that could be developed into something that cannot be developed there now, unless it's a house. But there could be some in-home or some small business that could go in there, and you still have land behind it that you could do some with. Because if you notice, it's pretty built up. So this is the idea of doing it there. And it might not happen for years, but at least it would give the opportunity to have some building there because the lots are so long.
So I see one area of, well, I won't say conflict, but if we decide that the bottom floor on the street has to be commercial, then, I mean, then we couldn't, we'd have to go to something other than what you're suggesting here, or at least for these areas. And the fact that the new one that you're bringing in already is commercial, would just grandfather those and how do we deal with those couple that are already commercial in these?
Well, some of them are already
surroundings?
commercial on the bottom and have apartments above it.
I know,
Yeah,
but
like the
I'm talking
accountants.
about this new brown, this new gold areas. If they're going to just be residential only, that means there is no mixed use in those areas, but there already is mixed use in those areas. So we would have to reconcile how we deal with that.
I think it's already a residential zone, so they're already pre-existing non-conforming. We would just be allowing additional residential units to be built.
Okay.
but what's there is but I think what we're saying is what's there is pre-existing non-conforming in that there's already commercial use there.
Correct.
Yeah. And we changed that in 2016, that was reverted back to residential zoning. It might have been small business before, if it was out of the GB3. So that was one of the actions we took in 2016. So now the question is what to do with those areas. Do you want to have mixed use, or should we make it opportunity for more dense residential development?
I personally would like
Purpose.
to see mixed use in there. It might not happen for years, but at least the opportunity is there while we're here. I don't want to give them a half a sheet of paper to work with. I'd rather give them a full sheet of paper to work with in the long run.
And what about the gold areas that are to the west?
I'm not in favor. I would consider a little more residential there, but I would not want to see any commercial other than what's there.
So you would be in
Personal.
favor of moving to the east, the gold additional areas, plus the 2 lots that you want to add?
Well, I only want to add them so that they're not non-conforming.
Right.
It seems kind of silly to make them non-conforming when later on down the line, there might be some other practical use for them. That was the only thought.
And that's the accountant's office and the, what's the other
And
one, the Broadreach?
Broadreach.
Yeah, okay. So it's already apartments above and commercial below, yeah. But you would be in favor of the entirety of the gold areas, plus
Well,
2 lots
I'm not
on
too-
the east,
I personally am not
mixed
too
use.
happy about going to the west with the gold area.
at all?
Yeah,
Or
I think
even more dense housing?
it's pretty, if you look, it's pretty dense there now.
Okay,
There's not very much open space there. I think there's one lot between the antique house that's there, the red antique house, and
I mean, the tables?
forget the name of the road.
Colonial tables or a different house?
yeah, but,
Yeah.
so, it's not, there's not that much there to play with. Where on the other side of the coin, there's more room to play with later on.
Okay, all right. How do you feel about it, Warren? Your point
You really want to know?
We do. We really want to know.
Nobody has greater respect on this board for Bob than I, but I am extremely displeased by the thought of even expanding to any of those gold areas. It seems to me a fundamental breach of the bargain we made when we created the neighborhood centers. A deal that the town bought was we're going to have very small, limited, confined, higher density areas in exchange for having R20 on the rest of 28. And now those gold areas would double the size almost of the thing, and the length of the 28 expanse within the neighborhood center is greater than this distance between the neighborhood center and the cornfields. I mean, it's one step away from the whole thing is high density plus. That wasn't the deal. Beyond that, even if that weren't the case, which I think makes it the death knell, nobody is going to say that wasn't it, but I would say that the neighborhood center was meant, the concept was, at least for me, remains a place where you're going to have mixed use, higher density, multifamily. You can get out and walk to basically anything you want in town, in the center. Well, it's almost 3/4 of a mile long on Route 28, a lot of which doesn't have sidewalks. So that's not a great thing, I don't think. I understand completely Bob's rationale for suggesting we look at extending it beyond Weldon Way, because, yeah, there's, businesses that are there anyway. But that's really not the point. If we're talking about it's zoned R20, so in the next 70 years, somebody might buy up 3 or 4 of those things and turn it into a few multi-million-dollar houses, the way they have in other parts of town. And you all know, right around the circle, down on Main Street, I mean, they shoehorned in there a couple of million-dollar houses, right in the middle of town. Not to mention what they're trying to do in behind Veterans Field. I mean, that can happen over time. But it seems to me the idea of dramatically expanding this defeats the intent and the philosophy of the neighborhood center as a concept, and just fundamentally abrogates the deal that was agreed to by the town. And it will be perceived as, see, we told you, higher density. They want higher density all the way along. Look. And then if we're saying, oh, well, we might want to have, higher density in the sense of it won't be R20 anymore, maybe it'll be R10, or we could have, well, that's all well and good, but I think that it fundamentally will submarine and kill any chance of getting our zoning approved. And it just, I just can't get over the fact that it's just not the deal that was cut. We need the zoning for what the town's already agreed to, not try and expand that zoning way beyond what was already agreed to in terms of the outline. So, while I understand completely the rationale, having driven along there, the idea of having a neighborhood center which itself is longer than the distance to the next neighborhood center, so that the R20 piece is getting smaller and smaller, it doesn't make any sense to me. So, while I respect and I understand the rationale for it, I'm dead set against it. So,
It's okay to disagree. You want to go next, Art?
Thank you. Well, I'm, for a village center, I think it's important to have mixed use. It's the best opportunity to get the two pieces to work together. It can be challenging to do one without the other. I don't think it's good just to have all of one and none of their other. So I think some component of mixed use should be considered, especially along Main Street itself. So to the area to the east, I would say mixed use is good. One supports the other. I have no problem whether to the west, whether that's excluded. I think there's some good points that Mr. Dubus brought up associated with that. But my experiences in dealing with village centers, which is, again, it's limited to here in a few other communities, is mixed uses and a component affordable is the best opportunity there. I mean, we may not get many opportunities to put affordable in, and if we can adjust some density requirements in here to include some affordable, I think these are the places that we should be looking at putting them. So the exact limits, I'm certainly flexible associated with that, and whether you include those two properties further just across from White Pond, that's fine. They're going to remain commercial properties anyway with some apartments above it. So certainly that can be included in there. So
Okay, so you would be in favor of the gold areas to the east,
to the east,
of including those in
Yes.
West Chatham?
that's correct.
Mixed use?
Yeah.
Okay,
And-
not to the west?
And those, several of those properties are rather large, so there's going to be components of other development that could occur in them because they're so large. And the mixed use provides that opportunity, I think, to allow for that. But I would hate for that all to be just residential, though. I'm not sure that that's going to be good enough. There doesn't have to be a major component of commercial, but even small business on a small section, just as suggested in another part of this, is certainly a plus component.
Catherine?
Yes, go
just
ahead.
I say, we're all here for trying to come up with more affordable housing and higher density. But while we're struggling with getting Neighborhood Center 1 off the ground, and we've got the cornfields, we've got we've got three others, put it that way. Which order we take them in.
Right.
There's going to be significant other chunks of real estate that have been identified already for higher density and mixed use, such that I don't think we should be looking at the only place that we're ever going to be able to have mixed-use development is in West Chatham Neighborhood Center. There's a good chunk of town. And as I say, the deal was we'll take those 4 chunks and we'll make the rest residential. a lot of which is not, and it will stay commercial as it is today, which is fine. It can be that forever. But it just wasn't the deal. But we're not limited to development of affordable housing in West Chatham Neighborhood Center. We just are by the current zoning in this discussion. But for the town, we've got 4 neighborhood centers that are all going to be developed somehow with respect to increased density, and multi-use.
Okay. Bob Wertschafter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm leaning towards 2, option 2. I think biting off another kind of zone at this time is more than we should get ourselves into, and for many of the reasons that Warren stated. If greater density is a desire, I think we do have those other 3 areas, and I'm not sure that we should even limit it, if we want to allow clustering, there's lots of places that it would make sense, and not put it in with this. It's almost its own separate discussion. So my hope is that we'll just get West Chatham done in as it is in option 2, or option 2 with the 2 properties that Bob suggested. But
Okay.
I would be against all the gold and a different designation for gold. I think that's something that comes later we always have the option 10 years from now to add something to this area if it turns out to be successful. But let's make it an attainable warrant article that people are likely to pass. So
Okay.
I think we should limit it to the purple we have.
Madam Chairman,
Okay.
could I
Just
say
let me
one more?
let me make a comment on Bob's proposal. It's just to note that option 2 actually does include an extension to the east.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, just so you know.
I think it was a little small on the top,
Yes,
and I thought that made sense.
okay.
Just to have, because if you have it on one side of the road and not on the other, it's sort of,
So option 2
Yeah.
does include an extension to the east on both the north and south of Route 28, and also we want to add in those 2 properties in addition, but it just doesn't designate a separate type of zoning for those added areas, correct? Okay, great, just
And
want to make
Catherine,
sure.
Just to be clear,
Yes.
while I was opposed to the gold areas,
But you're also
option
opposed to
2 has
option-
got a lot of expansion in it that I'm dead set against as well.
Okay.
It's not labeled other than the West Chatham proposed boundary, but that exhibit in here does in fact have in it what we had jointly all agreed made sense, and that was to expand the neighborhood center territory to the north of 28 because it's just across the street from, and it's open land and. But that West Chatham proposed boundary slide that is not an option, apparently, is what I am very much in favor of, and expanding it beyond that, past Weldon Way, is, well, I gave all the reasons why I'm against it.
Right,
so you want to even go smaller than what we already, that's in proposed boundary. You're actually taking
No.
out the stuff on the right of the,
No,
I
the
think this
proposed
is what-
boundary is what I'm in favor of. That's what we
Yes.
agreed to last time.
This is
Option
option
2
one.
expands it
Option one.
dramatically.
okay.
Warren,
I
if
can
I
live
could
with option one,
summarize
too.
and pipe in if I'm not correct, but I believe Warren is in favor of option 1, and everybody else is in favor of option 2. Bob Dubus might be in favor of some variation of option 2, which is option 3, which is a different kind of zoning for those added areas, or would you be in favor of option 2? I think you actually ended up being in favor of option 2, which is just to extend the West Chatham
I
Neighborhood Center
am,
to the
but
east.
I want to interject with something else,
All right,
okay?
yes, of
Warren
course.
brought up that we're going to work on 3 more local points which would be the Cornfield, Crow Road, and I would imagine North Chatham. I want to warn you, to know that there's very little land in the other centers. Crow Road is all chopped up. I mean, there are ways that they can combine a couple of pieces, which I'm not in favor of because they're big pieces, and if they got put together, they could cause a lot of just a lot of inconsistencies that I don't want to see developed. But most of those lots have been developed already. So this is the only spot in the village centers that is possible to have expansion without tearing buildings down. And this is why I thought it would be a better idea here. And there is limited space between the cornfield and the new proposed boundaries. And from there on, the Crow Road intersection takes part of Route 28, which is developed with Del Mar's is, I would imagine, we're going to take that into consideration. Down to the highway barn would be the corridor. That's basically very few houses there and a lot of businesses there. So, in the North Chatham one, the only lot that was left is now a gym. There are no lots left to build without tearing down places, and I don't see any of them being torn down in the near future. Maybe in 15 or 20 years, they might be torn down when people buy 2 or 3 lots and combine them all. So that's why I proposed this, Warren. I know it's a little larger than we had thought, but it's the only place that I can see development in the future.
Yeah,
South Chatham is pretty much booked up.
yeah. And we've already,
And Bob, I
already passed
understand the
that zoning.
rationale completely, but recognize the developed areas, if they are in a neighborhood center, be it North Chatham or Cornfields or here, within the neighborhood center, we have yet to define the size of the lots they could be, but it's likely to be more like a quarter of an acre. So from what you have now, and mixed use and multi-family, so that it may well make sense to subdivide something or to tear something down and build something new. And again, I just can't get past the point that the big hot button among most people that have expressed an opinion to me is we don't want increased density in Chatham.
Well, believe it or
and-
not, we are increasing density every time a house sells or a house gets built. So, I mean, I'm sorry, I can't say that there's not going to be any growth in Chatham. If there's no growth in Chatham, Chatham will disappear. And so we have to
I'm not
plan
arguing
ahead
that
for it.
point. I'm saying that the bargain that was made by,
I don't remember this bargain
Yeah.
that you're talking
When
about.
we-
But anyway.
I'd actually like to weigh in on this. I think, how to put this, I think, Warren, first of all, it does seem that the other board members, in a sense, you're in the minority, and the other board members tend to go for the expansion. I just wanted to comment, I understand what you're saying about what was said in the comprehensive plan. I think one thing the board has been responding to in our consideration of West Chatham is very clearly is that since the time of the comprehensive plan, things have changed. There's a very urgent need for moderately priced housing, which works well in a mixed-use zoning setting, because you can have apartments and smaller living spaces above commercial uses. It also helps to develop greater economic vitality in another area of town that already has a good basis for that kind of commercial development that can provide jobs and income for more people and for people of all demographics who have a more moderate level of income, seniors as well as working families. So because of that, I think we admittedly made some changes. One change that we agreed to as a board was to allow multifamily housing in the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, which initially, back in 2014 and 2015, when Cape Cod Commission did its original studies and we originally did all the workshops with the town, in general, multifamily housing in the West Chatham Neighborhood Center zoning was not favored. But the board reconsidered that because of the housing crisis on Cape Cod and in Chatham, and decided that we should include that as a use. And this is my individual opinion, I think in the same vein, some expansion of the size of the West Chatham Neighborhood Center is also a response to the change that's occurred in the last few years, that there is a very urgent need for moderately priced housing and for more diversity of economic opportunity in Chatham. So I would actually favor option 2, along with the 2 lots that Bob Dubus has mentioned as being the boundaries for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center. Also, what we were considering is the fact that within West Chatham Neighborhood Center, including the footnotes that address the issues of the runway protection zone, do leave certain areas that have more limited development potential. And so to compensate for that, we wanted to add some development potential to the east. So I think those 2 logics, in a sense, address that issue. You are correct in saying that the initial boundaries of the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, as noted in the comprehensive plan, do not go as far east, but they do go to the north. And also the comprehensive plan, for some reason, was not aware of the runway protection zone or any necessity for more limited development in those areas. So with that, that logic, I agree with the other board members that I hear what you're saying, but I'd go for option 2. Anyway. Bob, you have further points?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I don't think we should take any formal procedure on this. I'd like to hear from the general public on this growth spurt, and maybe see how many people are for it, how many people are not for it, and then maybe weigh our decision after the fact.
Yeah, no, that's what we have to do. And just a reminder that the action, the article on the town warrant, the boundaries of the West Chatham Neighborhood Center will be a separate article on the warrant. So it can be considered separately, but definitely we have to take it before the public and see what the public's response is. So anyway, I think at this point, it seems that right now there's 4 board members who favor option 2 and Warren favors option 1. And then we'll bring it before the public and see what the public response is. Does that sound about right? Yeah. Okay, great.
And 3 is off the table.
It looks like
3
we've
is off the
taken
table.
3 off the table, unless you want to make some more comments, Gloria, about
The only
option
comment
3.
is there is no intention of putting forth a multifamily zone at the same town meeting as West Chatham zoning. This was just a way of almost mediating Bob's request of expanding it. Because if you remember at the September 2026 meeting, the zone was already expanded to Weldon. That was what the board decided. They were like, well, let's expand the West Chatham Neighborhood Center to Weldon. And then at the last meeting when Bob suggested going to White Pond, we thought, well, what if we, gave another option in case board members weren't crazy about having, commercial? Because I think that there is a fundamental different feel once you pass Weldon. And I think that there are ways of preserving that character through performance standards for multifamily that you're not going to be able to do if you do a blanket multi-use neighborhood center zoning in that area. But no, we would never put that, that multifamily zone on the same warrant.
One of the reasons is that from Weldon Way west is pretty much developed. there's only one vacant lot that we know of, and there could be a couple more if the family decides to break up their land there, which, when we first started this, they did not want it. But, so there's limited growth on that side of Weldon Way. And that's why I'm trying to think of the future instead of having to go through this, but I think the public should weigh in on this, and it would be a big help
Yeah.
also.
Yes, and also, I just wanted to make a comment. I understand that the lot directly to the east of the Weldon Way lots is actually conservation land, is that correct? Yes, that one, I understand that's conservation land, yes. So we'd have to exclude that, wouldn't we? No? Or we
We'll have to
could
check
choose
and see whether or not it's technically municipal conservation, and yes,
Okay.
then that would be cut out of that area.
Okay, great.
So this gets back to a point that I probably didn't make very well at the beginning, which was, I think there is, and Gloria, you pointed it out in my mind exactly, that in parts of this zone, having lots of commercial is a good idea, but in some of it, having almost none, I don't know whether none is a proper use within this area, or whether it has to have some degree of mixed use. But I certainly would think, as we get to the periphery on both sides here, the idea that it has to be 60% commercial, or whatever we had thought about for the center starts making less sense to me.
And so the other thing, and if Katie wants to, she can walk us through on Google Maps. So there are a lot of commercial uses, right, to the east of Weldon. But the character of those commercial uses are very different than the character of the commercial uses that are already in the neighborhood center. So they are cottage colonies, they're like kind of lower scaled hotels with a lot of outbuildings. And to me, even though they're commercial uses, they feel like they could be more residential type uses, because you have small buildings, very diffuse on the site. You don't have a ton of things up at the road. A lot of things are, but not most of them. Things are more spread out. To me, it seems like if you like that character as you leave a village center, it's possible to increase housing density somewhat, not as much as in the village center, and maintain that kind of character of small, multiple structures on a lot, with or without commercial use. But I just think that if you make that the same as the West Chatham Village zoning and require buildings to be pulled up to the road and to have like longer facades and things like that, I think that the character will be fundamentally different.
That's not what I'm proposing.
Well, if it's all the West Chatham Neighborhood Center zoning, then that's like the build-out scenario. It's all going to look the same. I'm not going to say it is all going to look the same, but if we do build it out over the course of 50 years, it will. So that part right now that has, cottage colonies are all of a sudden going to have, not Dunkin' Donuts, but Dunkin' Donuts-like buildings.
But because what we have now requires the bottom floor to be commercial. And I
Yeah.
think that when we move out to those areas, I'm not sure we need a commercial space right on the road for every single one of those properties. So I see where you're trying to go, but I don't know if one zoning requirement works for this bigger area. Maybe I'm beginning to understand what you were trying to do.
So where we're going now with this is option 3.
No,
Yes,
just changing, maybe not changing
then-
that, but changing some of the,
Reducing the boundaries back a little bit, but
or the
but in 50
requirements
years,
as we get
in
further.
50
from-
years, the Cape might not even be here, so we don't even know what's going to happen in
That's
50
also
years. I mean, the rate we're going, It doesn't look good sometimes.
And again, Madam Chair, if I may, as Gloria mentioned, our intent was to, if we were going to explore something like this, that this would be something that would be done
Separately.
separately.
Yeah,
This
it's a
is not
separate
something that we would
action.
even work on right now. It would be just something to be considered for the future. We would keep, the option, just to the east of Weldon Way, as the board originally approved. And then, once we work with West Chatham and that's passed, then we would work to do something that would allow, perhaps that area to have a different, it wouldn't be the same zoning district, if you
It would be
will.
kind of an intermediate
It would be
level
an
of zoning.
intermediate
It
level.
wouldn't be R20, but it wouldn't be West Chatham Neighborhood Center zoning.
Right.
It would allow for greater residential density, maybe some mixed use, but maybe with slightly different design parameters or slightly different parameters. And it would be the gold area plus Bob Dubus's 2 lots to the east, which are the accountants and the Broadreach.
Yes.
So, and what you're so that is essentially option 3, but eliminating the gold to the west. I think everybody's pretty agreed that we don't want to think about that. So option, just to be clear, option 2 would be just proposing the whole area as West Chatham Neighborhood Center zoning, including all the added lots to the east, okay? Whereas option 3 is that we would basically, for this annual town meeting, we would actually be following Warren's suggestion and just be proposing the initial boundaries for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, and in a separate action in the future, maybe for the next annual town meeting, we'd propose a kind of intermediate zoning for the gold areas plus the 2 lots that are to the east of the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, but a slightly different pattern of intermediate zoning.
That's why we're here, is to hash this out.
Yeah, exactly. That's what, this is a working session. It's a discussion. Yeah. Go ahead, Warren.
Catherine, first off, I heartily endorse getting some input from the public here.
Yeah.
And what I was hearing here distilled in my mind, one of the objections I also had to dramatically expanding the neighborhood center, and that is what was being described here is, I think, more aptly described as the neighborhood village. That the zoning, we don't have commercial on, every building or whatever. Well, the whole idea of the neighborhood center for me was that's exactly what you do. It's a very small, concentrated place where you have an ability to walk. It's a walking area that can have multi-use, multifamily, whatever. But it's not the West Chatham neighborhood village that, where you don't want to have shops on the floor of every building that's on 28, which if you start dramatically expanding the neighborhood center boundaries, it becomes a neighborhood village, and it loses the whole character that was the whole purpose of our big gambit with the town planners, or the county planners, right, our consultants.
Cape Cod Commission, yeah.
Cape Cod Commission planners who, had examples from other Cape Cod and so on to come up with, okay, here's your neighborhood center, not village. Different ideas, and where there's the idea of maybe expanding and creating a little zone, a buffer, a village part on each side of a center wouldn't kill the ideas that we have already developed for what belongs in the zoning in the center.
Okay. Okay, so we should take a little time to consider some of the other open issues, but I just want to get a sense of the board if we're more or less in agreement now that we do need to get community input, but usually the way we do that is we agree on something that we're going to propose to the community to get input on. So I just want to get a sense of the board. Are you now feeling that we would stick with the original boundaries of the West Chatham Neighborhood Center and then consider the gold areas to the east along with the additional 2 lots for a future action that would allow for some kind of intermediate zoning that would allow for greater residential density primarily?
I think we should wait and hear from the outside world
Okay.
first.
All right,
We have two options.
all right,
Let's see what feedback we can get from the two options.
all right, sounds good. But I think we are in agreement that the gold areas to the west, we don't want to consider. I think everybody's in agreement on that. Okay, all right, great. So let's go to the next open issue. What's the next open issue? Housing density. The board had previously discussed whether the current density of approximately 4 units per acre should be maintained or whether it should be increased. Increasing the density can be an incentive for affordable or attainable housing, as well as provide a residential density that can help support neighborhood businesses and vibrancy of the neighborhood. Then we considered residential density immediately adjacent. That's what we've been talking about. All right. So we've been talking about also expanding the area of increased residential density, but for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center zoning proper, we just want to take a look at residential density. We talked about 4 units per acre. I think we talked about 8 or 6. We want to get a sense of where the board would like to land on that one to propose to the community, and then, of course, we get community input. Bob Dubus.
I would consider 6.
Okay,
I think a little more is necessary than in that specific area we're talking about. I would go with 6. I think 8 might be a little much for people to handle.
okay, and
What about 8 with an affordable element like we had suggested
Oh, yeah.
before?
so 6
6.
as the standard and 8 if there's, as an incentive for affordable, that's, yes, Warren?
You know, if I took a fairly close look months ago at this point at New Orleans, for example, they have density of like 20 per acre. Now, they've got 3-story apartment complexes and
Yeah.
things, so 20 is not the right number. 4, I think, is very low. Where I come out is that especially if it's made very clear that below-ground housing is permitted, that makes any 2-story structure we have out there 50% larger in terms of living units without increasing the mass of any structure. And if you increase the capacity of any structure that's built out there, then 4 units per acre easily becomes 6 with no change in that number. And so I think, you know, it ought to be like 8 with some incentives if you have deed-restricted affordable housing, or if the Chatham Housing Trust ends up owning some of these properties, which is, who knows if that's possible. And then no buyout provisions so that the buildings actually do have affordable housing in them. And limitations on short-term rentals and, you know, other types of things to try and ensure that our intent is somehow carried out in the real world. And you could even have an incentive not only on units, but also just on lot coverage as well, if you have increased affordable housing units. But for me, the minimum would be 8, and then maybe incentives so you could have up to 12. But recognizing that assumes you're going to be able to have below-ground housing, which no one has objected to. It's actually in our draft, but you got to read the footnotes to really even see it. And in terms of understanding what we're proposing in terms of density, I think it's important to understand that you can have a couple of bedrooms below ground, just the way every house that I see being built around here is being built so it can have living space underground. Every house. So I don't see why ours should be any different in the neighborhood center. So I'm in favor of 8 with all sorts of incentives on both lot coverage as well as number of units, but lots of restrictions on, hopefully deed restrictions, and no buyouts permitted, et cetera, to make sure it try and happens.
Okay. Arthur, your opinions on density?
Well, I started with the 6 with going to 8. I hadn't considered below grade pieces, they can be challenging from a building perspective, if I recall, Katie?
Sure, but they would also need to meet the building code, and if they couldn't meet building code based on the way
Right.
they were constructed or the topography, then they wouldn't be allowed. I mean, that's
Right.
whether they could be allowed or not, they would still need to meet the requirements of the state building code.
Right, right. That's what I thought. So it might not happen in every case. It might be based on some topography or something that you can get them in there, but not, if it's a flat piece of land, you may be challenged to do that. So I'm not quite sure on the number. I mean, it could go to 8 if that was a buildable related landscape that would account for it. But I'm not sure that's going to happen every place. But, I mean, if it can't happen, but you allow it, they go to 6 then.
Yeah, and I would say, if lot coverage restrictions would help keep the number down that could be built, even, if you
Right.
couldn't put the below-ground units in. So it's not, just because you say we're 8 or expanded with incentive to 12, doesn't mean you're going to put 12 in necessarily at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Wirtschafter.
So I come back to, there's got to be commercial space on this property as well. So are we talking 6 to 8 plus a commercial building that same
That's
size?
That's what we're talking.
Okay,
yeah.
so that's the first question. The second is, I mean, it seems to me it's going to be very different on most of these properties, which are maybe an acre or 2, and the ones that were 10. I mean, in 10 acres, I think I'd go for much higher density, but the coverage is the issue. How much of the property can we cover? And so, on an acre, I can see 30% or not being covered. But if we have a 10-acre property, I wouldn't want that 30% anymore. I'd want much more open land. So I'm not sure. How much of that we have to put into the bylaw is an issue, I guess. But I do like the idea of having incentives for deed restricted, affordable. I think that has to be part of this. Otherwise, we're just going to end up with a lot of very expensive apartments in these areas.
I think Katie has a comment. Please go
Sure.
ahead.
I'd just like to remind the board, though, that, this proposal allows for multiple buildings on a lot. And so, those units may be spread out over 2 or 3 buildings and not necessarily have to be, whether they're basement apartments or not. That wouldn't necessarily be the case. So I wanted to remind the board of that. I know it's been a while since we looked
Yeah.
at what the potential configurations are, but there is a possibility that there's going to be multiple buildings. The other thing when thinking about lot coverage and the build-out analysis, there are still parking requirements and setbacks that need to be met. So it's not necessarily maximizing each lot, to the maximum extent. All of the other zoning requirements will still have to be met. So that's just something else for the board to keep in mind as you're considering that. If we're allowing more units, that requires more parking. And so, those are
Right.
just things to keep in
Right.
mind.
Right.
So again, I'm going to go back to most of these 1 acre or 2 acre, 1 acre lots is we're really not talking about more than a couple apartments. Given 50% has to be commercial, maybe we're going to get 4 apartments in one of those. So how do we make it so they make it 6 and make it affordable? Again, it can't be, you can put in 6 and then if you make it affordable, you can put in 12 because that would only work on the bigger properties. I think in a smaller property where the limit would be whatever, 4 possibly, just because of the size, we can add to whatever that limit is if the whole thing is affordable. That seems how it's going to have to work.
So you're
Is that
saying we,
something that people have done somewhere else, Gloria, or Katie?
Do you mean different densities per lot area?
Yeah, something on that order.
We have that in Provincetown, actually. So it's like a 5,000 square foot minimum for the first unit, and then after that, it's smaller and smaller. It wouldn't be exactly the same way in Chatham, but you could do, if you have an acre, you could do 6 units. If you have 2 acres, then you could do 8 units per acre, something like that.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Dubus.
I know that we need 51% commercial to have livable area upstairs. Well, in the Chatham Center, why couldn't we have 30% commercial and 70% residential? In
In West Chatham.
who's to say we can't change it in
Oh, in West
the,
Chatham,
the
what you're
Chatham
saying?
Village, or not a village,
Right.
whatever you want to.
Neighborhood center, yeah.
But that's an idea.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if I could, I
Katie.
don't believe that we had that requirement. I think that's the current requirement.
yes, exactly.
And I
Yes.
don't believe that we required the percentage of commercial.
Right.
Because if you go, let's see.
To the draft.
Under the last point about other planning board questions, we had talked about consider whether to include the maximum building facade width should be reduced, whether an extra half-story should be allowed when affordable housing is provided, and whether to require commercial uses only in the front 30 feet of the building's first floor along 28, which would actually not allow that to even be 50%. But one of the things that we talked about was that the front-facing units or the front-facing ground floor needed to be commercial, but that perhaps the rear units or the rear of the building could be used for residential. And so that was something that was discussed. So I don't believe, and forgive me
No, I think
if I'm
that's
wrong,
right.
but I don't believe we required a percentage of commercial in this draft.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, right? Yeah, Arthur.
I think what everybody's getting into is once you start to increase the density of this up, you're gonna start to get complications of one issue is gonna override another issue. I think, Bob, you mentioned the parking-related piece. The challenge to this is look at this more comprehensively. Shared parking, link parking, those type of approaches can make this work. If you just look at one isolated property by itself, and you say, well, you just got to do everything there, and don't look at the rest of the adjacencies, you're not going to get very far, I think. My previous experience on this is when you have a comprehensive plan that is presented to the board by whoever the developer is, that gives you an idea of how all the pieces can work together. Even if it's one of the larger parcels that are 2-3 acres, a comprehensive plan about how that can all work together is going to make a lot of sense from the standpoint of, does it work? All right, and then it'll be easier for us to make the judgment call about, yes, this number of units will work here because, or is parking going to limit it, or does the coverage limit it? And what about all the landscaping that we also have as components in here? When you start to put all those together, unless you see the whole combined picture, I don't know that we're going to be able to find that every lot is going to be, 4, 6, 8, 10.
Yeah, but we do need to define, in general, the range that it can fall within. Yeah, so, yes.
Yeah, I think that, and we've talked about this a couple of times, I'm not sure how mechanically it works. Having more power here to be able to trade off some of these things against each other, so that, and how much of that has to be in the bylaw and how much of it is some kind of working procedures that we had developed for ourselves. I guess I'm reaching out to you again to how much of this really needs to be in the bylaw, and what about the trade-off kinds of, we'll give you 2 more units if you do this. We'll give you another unit if you do this.
Yes,
Just
Katie.
from an interpretation standpoint, I think it's better to have it defined.
Yeah.
I think that, as we talk about it right now, 10 years from now, with a different building commissioner or different staff, I think it's important to define it as clearly as possible as to what the board would like to see. One of the other points I wanted to make is that, because any redevelopment or development in these areas will have a commercial component, they will be required to have site plan approval. And so all of the site plan review criteria that are currently required in the zoning bylaw will continue to be required for all of these parcels as well. And so looking at, adequacy of parking and, traffic flow and things like that, those are all things that will continue to be considered by the planning board as any property gets developed or redeveloped. So that's just something also to keep in mind, just to what Art was saying earlier, that, as we look at these parcel by parcel, the board will have the opportunity to comment if they, if the board feels that there's more parking needed or,
Right.
that,
Yes.
the development may be too dense, the board will have the opportunity to comment at that point as well.
And also, I'll just comment that whatever we decide to propose to the community that we put as a density, that's the maximum that we're saying per acre. So if we say 6 maximum with 8, with incentive for affordable units, they could always build 4, or 5, or 3. And again, depending on the particular configuration of the lot and the particular uses and so on, a property owner could elect to do less. We're just defining what the maximum could be and how much more we want to offer as an incentive to build affordable units. I'm just going to say, as my individual opinion, I think we can't go too high. We have to be a little careful. And so I would be a little more in favor, I think I'm more in favor of a middle road, a middle ground on this one. 4 units is probably about, what we're used to. 6 is higher, I think, than what we're used to. So I would go for 6 with 8 units maximum with affordable housing. Again, we'd like to increase the density, but I just think 8 to 12 might be a little bit too dense. So that would be how I'd weigh in on this particular question. And I agree with Katie that I think it's much better if we specify everything as much as possible. The neighborhood center zoning and the form-based code gives us the opportunity to do that. And I think in the long run, that is much more favorable to specify in the zoning as much as possible, because we can really help to define what the future possible redevelopment of West Chatham will look like in the most intelligent way. So, any other comments on this issue of density before we maybe move on to taking some public comment? Yes, Bob Dubus.
I have one question that, I know that we voted to bring the buildings up front,
You did, yes.
but
That's a
that's not a mandatory thing that we put in there, is it? It wasn't mandatory?
Yes.
Yes, because I think the feeling was that it's more of a neighborhood atmosphere where the buildings are closer to Route 28, and there's like a sidewalk and walkability, and not parking lots in front of the buildings. So I think that's the idea, that it's more of a neighborhood atmosphere.
Yeah, it's all part of the form-based zoning philosophy.
So what's the maximum setback that we,
Along Route 28?
Along Route 28, it's 20 feet,
20 feet?
yes. Minimum is 10, maximum is 20.
Right, but no parking on the front, it could be on the
Correct.
side.
No, I understand that. I like to see I like to see the give and take on each side, you know what I'm saying? To have a line of 10-foot buildings up in the front is kind of not as as acceptable as having the 50-foot setback on the whole line of buildings.
Right.
I like to see some diversity.
Right. I think the whole idea when we made the 10 to 20 feet was to allow for some amenities in that front space, depending upon the type of use that's there,
That is on the property line, correct?
from the property line. So it's
so
be,
that's
it
not
would
as
be even
bad.
further from the
Yeah.
road.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
not as bad as.
it's the property
I'm
line,
thinking.
yeah.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so we did address the road setbacks a little bit, which is the next issue that was open. We haven't really talked about the remaining issues. We'll probably need to reserve those for next meeting because it's getting close to 5:15, and we did want to allow some time before we take a break at 5:30 for public comment. So if it's all right with the board, we'll go to public comment. Again, I'd like to ask, just out of consideration for the time and for other speakers, if you are recognized by the chair, could you limit your comments to about 3 minutes? And I do see that Rick Levitt's hand is raised, if you'd like to go ahead. Rick?
Thank you, thank you, Catherine. Yes, I applaud your work. It's been a long time in coming, and I've been a strong supporter. I've got a number of comments. I'll try to limit it to 3 minutes, and if I can't, I'll put it on paper and send you a memo.
That'd be great.
On the boundaries, I'm all in favor on the north side, adding the north side of the West Chatham Center to be within the West Chatham Center boundaries, as well as adding the Buckley property. I throw you out a real caution on adding anything else at this point. There certainly is merit in adding at a later date, but what I am concerned about is if you get too ambitious here, you're going to attract a lot of opposition. I would recommend that for now, at least, you stay focused on the original plan, expanding the north side, expanding west only to the Buckley property. By the way, my property is abuts the Buckley property and abuts the North Chatham boundaries, southern boundaries as they're currently stated. And I'm very much in favor of this kind of development in West Chatham Center. On the density issue, it's going to, the density issue will attract as much opposition as possible. What I would recommend to you is can you all see this?
We're not able to see it, no. There,
Yeah, I'm having trouble. Can you see it now? Anyway, I'll
Unfortunately
describe it.
not.
I'm having a little trouble with my camera here. I've spoken to Katie about this in the past. The architectural firm Union Studio has been presenting to a number of towns here on the Cape their whole concept of what is called missing middle. And this really deals with the density issue in a way that people can understand it. They can see what's being presented. What I recommend to you is have Union Studio come to you and make their presentation that they've made to 5 communities on the Cape, including Orleans and Eastham, but also Sandwich, Falmouth, and Hyannis. That really focuses everyone's attention on what density is and what it can be and look like, even though it's more than 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 units per acre. The firm is, the architectural firm, Union Studios, is a highly respected organization. They've designed higher density projects on 3 or 4 acres that take 28 units. 20 of them were market rate housing, and the other 7 or 8 were affordable, deed restricted units. That's the kind of mixed income development that we're looking for here in Chatham. And I would strongly encourage you to have that firm come and make the same presentation that they made to 5 other towns on the Cape, make it to you so you can easily, and the public can easily understand what density is. As far as street frontage setback is concerned, I would go to 0 to 20 and let the property owners decide for themselves how they want to develop. For example, there are some properties on the south side of West Chatham Center that have a steep drop off. If you can bring the structures closer to the street, that's going to create more parking for you in the rear, and also an alley to accommodate shared parking. So those are my comments. I have other comments as well. I know you'll be taking them up later in other meetings, and I'll comment then. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rick. So are there other hands raised from the public? I see, looks like Gloria. Gloria, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. It's Gloria Freeman, and I thank you for keeping your options open tonight on boundaries. I was hoping you might show the map with the boundaries that the residents of West Chatham preferred. As you know, the long-range comprehensive plan and the planning board's master plan state that the boundaries of neighborhood centers are to be based on the collective needs and desires of each specific neighborhood's residents. So perhaps at your next meeting, you could show that map, certainly when you meet with the public. I would also encourage you to look in the overview of the land use section of the long-range comprehensive plan, which reads, and I'm quoting, "The primary growth management challenge facing the town today is to keep Chatham as it is now, preserving the unique character of each neighborhood, maintaining and minimizing commercial development, conserving open space," and then it goes on with others. But it seems to me that what you're doing is expanding commercial development. In the long-range comprehensive plan, in the section describing West Chatham, it states to limit commercial development and redevelopment to the existing commercial areas of the neighborhood. So you do say that you're working to implement the long-range comprehensive plan and your own master plan. And I just wanted to point those out because I didn't hear that discussed. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Gloria. Are there other comments from the public? Yes, I'm having trouble reading the name.
It's Dave.
Dave, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, please introduce
David.
yourself.
David Bixby.
Okay.
I think it'd be wise to consider, I don't know the one guy's name, but he seems to be the lone dissenter on the board, with concerns about overexpanding this district. If you keep creeping along the road, you're getting dangerously close to endorsing strip development, and I think that goes counter to the intention of having a neighborhood center. My other concern here that I think you're overlooking is conservation land. Any map or every map that you put on the board should clearly define the conservation land, because it looks to me, I haven't studied these maps, but there's an awful lot of land there that doesn't look like it's developed. And I suspect some of that is conservation land, and I would be concerned, very concerned about, and I think a lot of people in Chatham would be concerned about infringement on conservation land. I know there's some on the north side, but I'm thinking specifically of the area just south of the property that has the airport on it. That's kind of an overlooked piece of property, and I know there's a population of I think they're box turtles in that area. A lot of your outline seems to me to go quite a bit into that area that would threaten that land. I would be concerned about that. I think you need to not overlook the areas that are conservation. All your maps should clearly indicate where protected conservation land is and whether or not there's a need for buffer zones. I suggest you reach out to the Conservation Committee or board, whatever they are, and have them weigh in on that. And I'll just my last comment is, and maybe this isn't the forum for this discussion, but I think you are conspicuously absent in this whole discussion continues to be the incompatibility of a neighborhood center and the airport. I don't know how or when you're gonna really get into that, but it seems to me that you're very carefully avoiding the discussion, and I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bixby. We have time for at least one more speaker from the public. If there's someone, I do see a hand. I have trouble reading the name. Can you read the name?
I think all the hands are down now.
All the hands are down now.
That
So,
was me again.
okay. So no further public comment. All right. Any comments from the board? Any further comments or discussion from the board? We could go ahead and take our break a few minutes early, or we could consider.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
I think we should include the conservation areas in our map so the public and we will know where they are.
Yes. All right.
Just off the cuff.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. We can do that. And Katie already mentioned that for the next meeting, those will be delineated. Yes. And Arthur, you had a comment? No? All right. So we won't be starting until 5:45, our regular business meeting. We could break now and take a 20-minute break instead of a 15-minute break, if that's all right with everyone. And just a reminder to board members that there'll be no substantive discussion during the break, and our mics will be off during the break. All right, thank you. November 28th, 2022 meeting of the Planning Board of the Town of Chatham. We've just had a brief 15, 20-minute break. We began our meeting at 4 p.m. with a working session of the Planning Board with discussing our long-range planning initiative. Now it is 5:45, and we are beginning our regular business items on the agenda for the evening. So the first item on the agenda, the minutes from November 14th is included on the agenda, but they have not been submitted as yet. So we'll move to the next agenda item, which is a preliminary subdivision plan review. And this is for 50 Stetson Cove Lane and 75 Stetson Cove Lane Extension. And we have Dave Clark presenting for us. Thank you. Please go ahead, Dave.
Good evening, David Clark, Clark Engineering, on behalf of Tom Stello of the Stello Surveying and Land Surveying and the Watts family. I trust you all have looked at the revised plan. When we move forward with a definitive, number 75 will not be part of the application anymore, in that it's not being altered at all.
Okay.
So the new plan is strictly a two-lot division of 50 Stetson Cove. The difference primarily is we've extended the cul-de-sac into the property, the amount needed to gain the frontage to create the two lots. One lot is a panhandle, having 110 feet of frontage, and the other being 150 that complies with the zoning bylaw. After the last meeting, I did have a conversation with Barbara Wells, who lives at the end of Stetson Cove Extension. And she had listened to the meeting, and we had a long discussion about the history of the neighborhood, and we talked about the intent of her family back when the subdivision was done to keep it rural looking, and that's why the planning board back at that time granted the waivers that they did. She also stated that being there for almost 100 years, they've had medical emergencies down there, and EMS has had no issues of getting to her house, or once was her parents' house, for medical emergencies. That being said, I did take a look at Stetson Cove Lane again after the meeting, and it does need improvement. I did provide the planning department with the approved road improvements plan from about 20 years ago, so that one of the lots down Stetson Cove Lane could be, extension could be developed. What the planning board required back then was an 18 feet of cleared roadway, I believe 12 feet of gravel surface, and and 3-foot shoulders. The road has overgrown since then, to the point that because it's a rural road and doesn't see a lot of traffic, it's probably just barely 12 feet of traveled way now, but the shoulders have certainly overgrown. And I discussed that with the Watts family, and they're more than happy to restore the road to the previously approved requirements of 12 feet. They do, in their development of the two lots, there will probably be a shared driveway, and they could also work into that shared driveway a turning T within the cul-de-sac if the planning board feels that there's a need for a turning area there for emergency vehicles.
Great.
That's a summary of the changes and the conversations I've had with both the abutter and the Watts family. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Dave. I just wanted to say I think the redesign is better, definitely. way you've laid out the lots this time. I did want to ask, because the new lot division actually dissects the existing dwelling, I'm just wondering what the plan is. Is the plan to move those dwellings or demolish them, or?
They
what
haven't
is the
made up their mind yet because
Okay.
they wanted to have some assurances as to what the definitive plan was going to look like before they engaged in architects, because basically they'll want 2 new houses on these properties.
Two new houses, you said?
Yeah, one on each lot.
One on each lot.
And
Yeah.
so, obviously, 2 of the houses don't conform with setbacks, and they understand that either they have to be moved, partially demolished, or totally demolished.
Right, okay.
And given that the oldest dwelling on the property is well over 150 years old, there's the issue of whether they want to try to save the older portion of the house. Right now, the plan is to save the oldest portion of the house. On the 5-bedroom dwelling, the northerly addition was put on, geez, a little over 20 years ago, I believe. The oldest portion of the house is significantly smaller than the footprint you see, so there is a good opportunity to save that and move it to the buildable portion of the property and incorporate it into the new house.
But basically, their goal is just to create 2 new lots.
Yes.
And they'll have a dwelling on each lot, and they'll be either moving or demolishing the existing dwellings.
Yes.
All right. I
Yep.
just wanted to understand that. All right. Any questions or comments, Arthur, for Dave?
I was able to find the correct answer.
Oh, you're-
Thank you, thank you. I was able to find the correct access this time around. It did help enlighten me associated with this. I think your clarification of width clearance and the roadway is acceptable. So, and your revision to the lots makes sense. I think maybe when you actually pay attention to the gravel roadway would be dependent upon when the construction is finished. If you do it at the beginning and don't do it at the end, they could be in the same condition that it is today. So timing on that would probably make more sense rather than doing it too soon.
Like I said at the previous meeting, the Watts family have been here for 3 generations now, and their intent is to keep the rural character of the neighborhood and respect the neighbors also. And so it'll come down to the conditions that the planning board places on the road construction, in that the conditions have to be met or bonded prior to conveyance, and so certain things have to happen as well as the house demolition or being moved. So it'll all depend on the conditions, but we expect to restore the road after construction's complete.
But from a preliminary plan perspective, I think you're a go here.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Great. Bob Dupas, go ahead.
Yeah, David, we were down there, both Art and I were down there. And we just saw some of the shoulders should be trimmed back.
Yeah.
With all the excavators and bulldozers and trucks and all what's going on, the road will get torn up a little bit. I'm sure they're gonna maintain the short distance that's there, and then Stetson Cove Extension actually is not in bad shape. That's been held up pretty good. I'm sure that as long as no trucks and traffic's down there, and I don't see any needing to be down there.
No, there are
That'll
no
be-
more buildable lots
Right,
down there.
That'll be fine. So it's just a couple, I think, about 250 feet of roadway to that?
Just shy of that, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a doable thing, to keep that up. And when the construction's all done, if they just restone, and my thing would be to just grade it and put a light coating of stone on it to hold the water from wearing it out, they should be
It's-
fine.
The roadway itself has held up remarkably well. We've had those large rain events in September and
there a while.
October. And I went down there after one of the events, and there wasn't a stone out of place compared to a lot of other places in town that had tremendous washouts.
Okay. Warren, questions, comments?
I was down there. I don't have anything to add to what's been said.
Okay, and Bob Wirtschafter?
I don't have anything either.
All right, great. So this is a preliminary subdivision plan review, and seems like it's acceptable to the board. And what we would do is we would approve this plan, or approve it with modifications, or disapprove. What I'm hearing from the board is that we would now want to take a vote to approve this preliminary subdivision plan.
I'll move to accept this plan for a preliminary plan. I think we can wait until the other plan comes to before we can,
Condition it,
Yeah,
yeah.
condition
No,
it.
no, you're right, yeah. Do I have a second to that motion?
I second.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote. Bob Wirtschafter?
Approve.
Art?
Art Sprue, approve.
Warren?
Warren Chain, approve.
Bob Dubus?
Bob Dubus, approve.
This is Catherine Halpin, I also approve.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Have a good night.
All right. Next item on the agenda is again, this is for a site plan review, but it is a pre-application conference. And this is for 1223 Main Street. Ron Rudnick is the owner, and it looks like you'll be representing us. And let's see. I just want to remind the board, this is a pre-application conference for site plan review, change of use, regarding a change of use. And basically, at this conference, we just want to let the applicant know what we need to see for the formal site plan review. So please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Bill Litchfield here on behalf of Liberty Artisanal Breads, LLC, which is Tom Guadagno, who is seated in the front of the room. He's the audience member who's not on the select board, if you're not sure which one he is. We are here in regard to 1233 Main Street, the center unit, which had formerly been a hair salon, which is now vacant. In fact, two of the retail or commercial spaces in that building are not currently used. And Tom would like to open a retail bakery shop. The majority of the floor space, which is about 1,200 square feet, 800 square feet or so, will be for baking purposes. As you know, the purpose of this meeting is to talk about what is proposed, and that is what is proposed. There are essentially no site changes. I recognize that retail use, which we have now, is a different line item from personal and professional services, which is what the hair salon is. But there are no exterior changes. Retail sales would have approximately 350 square feet, of which about 150 square feet would be counter service only, sit-down dining. If you want to get a croissant or have a cup of coffee with it, you can do it there, but it's not a restaurant as such. So it strikes me, I did get a chance to look at the staff comments, and I appreciate the work staff did in that regard. A lot of the ordinary criteria are not at issue. There's no change in vehicular access to circulation, no change in pedestrian traffic. Parking is obviously something that is at issue, but most of the other criteria are not really applicable. We're on town sewer. There are no exterior changes. Appropriate signage will be dealt with the HBDC as necessary. One change to the site that we will be required to do, would want to do anyway, is to have a dumpster at the rear, and I think your file contains a letter from the property owner saying that he would allow a dumpster to be placed in the rear. There are currently 24 spaces. There are 3 apartment units upstairs. That takes care of 6 spaces, leaving 18 available. By my calculation, we would need approximately 8 spaces, 2 for the 150, 2 or 1 per 150 square feet of retail space. So 2 spaces for that. 3 seats, or 3 spaces rather, for the dining facility. And I don't want to call it the restaurant because it wouldn't be that. Thank you. It's not even luncheonette because it'd be as much breakfast, but I understand exactly what you're saying for the ability to sit down and enjoy some of the baked goods. And for staff, we're not really sure because he's starting out anew, afresh. Tom estimates, he hopes he's busy, and he estimates that the maximum number of employees would be 6, but they wouldn't be there at one time. Probably 5 would be the outside number at the summer, more likely 4. And in reality, Tom can also park in the rear, and again, the property owner has indicated that he would allow parking at the rear. So I think that the highest number we would need would be 10 of the 18 that are available. That leaves 8 for the other retail uses, and as I say, 1 is closed, and I'm not aware of anybody that's going in there. The other is I guess it's professional services or personal service. It's a dog grooming. Is that the business that's in there? Dog grooming store. I don't know how active they are. So that essentially is what we are seeking in the pre-application conference or meeting. When you get to the point of what you are asking for, I would say something that I'm sure you know, that having an updated site plan is a very time-consuming process. Tom would like to be open for business. I checked with Christina to see if you've yet filed your January hearing timeframe. If possible, we'd like to be back in front of you in January so that he can start on the interior work he needs to be open for business in the spring. So I'm optimistic that an updated formal site plan, which will show no changes, will not be required. So I'll stop there and listen to your questions and comments, if I may.
Okay.
Madam
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Dubus.
I just had one question for
Oh,
Bill.
go ahead.
Bill, did you count the grassed area
Yes.
up front also?
Yeah.
Okay.
When it was in front of you a number of years ago for approval, you designated that whole grass area as reserved parking, so it is available. And I think in your file, there are some photographs showing cars parked there.
And there's a note in there that can be done.
Correct. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Dubus.
Okay.
You got to come,
Great. Any
Madam
other-
Chairman, if Tom could pass out just
Sure.
something that shows
Yeah.
what he proposed. You got to speak into the mic.
Sure, please go ahead.
If you could just, when you're speaking, please speak into the microphone.
Thanks. All right, other questions from the board? Warren, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, Counselor, just to clarify, there's plenty of room in the back for parking, I believe.
That is correct,
And
Mr.
it's
King.
principally for the tenants, I believe, right?
Too good.
Is access to the apartments above all through the stairways that are in the back, or are there entrances in the
There's
front?
probably a fire requirement for interior or some sort of 2 means of egress and access, but I think the tenants do park in the rear.
All right. I noticed that there are 8 electric meters on the building. But if by my count, there's only 8 users of electricity. Is there a plan in the future, or am I missing something?
I don't know how the metering is operated. There is presumably one for each building each apartment upstairs, one for each of the 3 commercial spaces. There may be, I believe it's a condominium building, and I don't know whether any of the condominiums have been sold. I have no idea of that. Or it's in the plans. It's shown on a plan as a condo, we don't know. And maybe there's, one circuit for common areas. I do not know.
Okay, but there's nothing funny, well, not funny going on, I don't want to use that word, I just, that I'm unaware of, put it that way. I was wondering if there were more apartments than I thought.
No, we have no knowledge of anything except for the unit we'd be renting.
Now, as for the dumpster in the back, they're talking about a commercial dumpster. I'm not sure what a commercial dumpster looks like compared to what I see as dumpsters at all of the businesses in town. Is there something different about what they're
No,
proposing?
I think that may have been simply a reference that is not a residential dumpster. Most of us, unless the Chain family is different from mine, most of us don't have dumpsters for
I know.
residential purposes. No, I think we'd be talking about a fairly
There's no
small one,
dumpster
not
there.
one of the big 30 yards or whatever they are. We're talking about a small one.
Okay, there are no dumpsters there now, they just have some disposal bins.
Correct.
As for whether a concrete pad is appropriate, I would leave that to somebody else. It doesn't seem unstable or soft or whatever, so that as long as there's agreement between tenants, parties, and lessor lessee, seems to me there is adequate room for that, as well as there's adequate room for additional parking if the other two tenants change over and require spaces that are not currently available. So, it looks, I don't have any other questions than that.
Thank you, sir.
Warren, the only time you need a concrete pad is if the people picking the rubbish up have wheels on their containers so they can move them. A lot of times, if you see where Dunkin' Donuts is, there's no wheels, it's just right on the ground, so they just go in and flip it over.
Great. Arthur?
Yes, a couple of clarifications or information for the formal site plan. You're talking about 2 additional cafe tables will be located on the front, out in the front, on the sidewalk to allow for additional seats. We'll need some information associated with that. Make sure that wherever those are located, there's parking right there, that there's separation or protective measures so that vehicles aren't going to be plowing into any, and if they're occupying a sidewalk, how do you get access if there's vehicles, if there's tables on there? So the sidewalk can't go away in the front. So how is that all configured? So information associated with that.
We can identify those on a plan.
Yeah. And then just for our purposes, I know, Katie, you always go through and verify the amount of parking. So I'm assuming that you would do that, assuming that there was enough information to be provided by the formal site plan to allow you to do that, so we can confirm. I don't think there's going to be any issue with it, but you got to go through the calculations just to verify it. And the last thing, I was out there, you're right, there's not a lot of things that are going on with the site. I'm personally not looking for an updated site plan.
We appreciate that.
However, there is a catch basin there, there is a storm drain system. If there's plans on file someplace, if you could dig those up and provide us with what those are, that would be helpful. Everything contours to it, there's nothing going out to Main Street or anything, so there's no issues or concerns associated with that. There is a dip in front of there. There's like a little sinkhole by there. A repair should be done associated with that. We can condition that as part of the formal site plan, but it would be good if you just noted that that's going to be corrected.
We can look into it. We don't, obviously we can't speak for the property owner, but we'll see what we can find out. I would presume that Katie's files may show the drainage calculations from when the building was constructed.
I'm not necessarily looking for calculations, looking for information that there is indeed a drainage system there, that's all.
Yeah. If you come
Yeah,
up.
please speak on the mic. And please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm going to be the bakery owner and baker. My name is Tom Guadagno, and in relation, maybe sometime within the month, there was a very heavy rain overnight, and my wife and I took the dogs out to the beach, and we noticed there's a lot of flooding at one of the parking lots. So on our way home, I said, I'm going to go check that property and see what's going, if there's any problems with water. Didn't see any flooding on the parking lot, and I went down the back, which I was also concerned, and no flooding there. So if there's the drainage that's there, it looks like it's doing a pretty good job. That's important.
If it
Yeah,
survived,
For me,
not-
it was.
I'm not disputing that, but.
No, just to say that at least it, everyone could say there's drainage there, but does it work?
Right, there's a difference if there's no drainage system,
Yeah.
as I've seen on some sites, or
Yeah.
there is incomplete, or drainage system is in a place that serves no purpose because it all drains off into the main street. That's a different issue. You
Yeah.
don't have that here.
No, we know that we're downhill from Main Street,
That's
but
exactly
if we
right.
survived that October
right.
27 or 28, whatever it was, deluge, if we did that, I think we're in good shape.
The only reason I'm bringing up that whole pothole is if it's not repaired, it gets just worse, and then you do have a problem. So that's a small little repair. I'm not asking for much. It's a safety-related issue more than anything. Thank you. And again, it could be a simple note or something like that. We could condition it, so it's not a major issue here at all.
Okay, great. Great. I just want to clarify the parking. So there's parking in the rear, and then there's parking in the front, and there's 24 spaces in the front. Is that correct?
Yes, so there's.
The answer is yes. As shown on the plan that we
Yes.
have, 12 reserved along the street, 24 right in front of the building. 12 additional
Right.
in front of the building for a total of 24.
Right.
Those in
And
the
then-
rear are not marked.
They're not, yes. The ones in front of the building are not marked, or which
No,
ones are
the
not?
ones in the front of the building are,
Are marked, but the ones along the street are not marked.
correct.
Yes. And in the back, how many additional?
Not marked.
Not
an
marked, but
indeterminate
approximate.
number.
Indeterminate number. All right. I just wanted to get the parking clear, because you're saying that the bakery will need 10 spaces? No?
10 at the max.
I
10 at
thought
the
that's
most
what you
by my-
said,
10
by
at the
your
most by my
calculations.
calculation.
Yes, and that of the 24, 6 are allocated for the apartments, so there's 18 left. So that means 8 left for the other 2 commercial spaces, plus any parking in the back. So that means 4 for the dog groom wash and 4 for the retail foods. So the board needs to consider the whole picture regarding parking and what's available in the back. And just to be very clear about what is available in parking and what your use requires, because we'll need to look at that exactly, is all I'm saying.
As I think we may have mentioned, I believe the retail food store is gone, that is now vacant. I understand you
But
need
it's
to
going to
deal
be
with the future.
filled. Yeah, we shouldn't assume that empty means forever. So we do have to assume that those other retail spaces or other commercial spaces will need parking. And the board needs to consider, just to consider the parking requirements exactly. So when you come with your formal, just make sure everything is very clear and very exact, and the board needs to consider that. And the other thing, I think Arthur made it clear what we need to see about drainage. We just need to see that more clearly. Again, I think staff has done a wonderful job in their staff report summarizing our site plan review criteria. So just examine each of those when you come back for your formal and make sure that you've addressed each of those issues in your formal application, and also the additional issues that staff notes on the staff report. Just make sure you've addressed each of those issues. And I don't think I really had any other questions other than that. So, Bob Wirtschafter.
Yeah, I, 2 questions, and I'm not sure whether they're applicable or not, but is there an ADA entrance? And is that required?
I do not know the answer. We will find out. There is appropriate HP spacing right in front, but I do not know whether it's ADA compliant.
Okay. And then the second issue that I think you need to look into is the oven and the exhaust, because usually we don't worry about exhaust because it goes up through the roof, but you got a second story up there, so.
Yep.
Need to have an exhaust that isn't gonna blow people, into people or, so those are two issues I think you have to look at.
We appreciate that, Mr. Wirtschafter.
Great. Any other comments from the board? We also need to decide whether we want to schedule a site visit and/or a public hearing. If I could get a sense of the board, Bob Dupas.
I do not and do not.
Do not, okay, no site visit, no public hearing required.
I don't
board.
think a site visit or a public hearing is warranted.
Okay, and Arthur?
No site visit, no public hearing warranted.
Neither.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we need a site visit or a public hearing required. You've heard the comments from the board. Do you have any questions from the board? Yeah.
I have
For the
only
board?
one, Madam Chairman,
Sure.
and perhaps Bob may have some others, but the staff comments, and this gave rise to the question I raised earlier about an updated site plan. The staff comment, referenced the ruled box. I think
Yeah.
we would anticipate a written decision rather than a signed site plan, so that would presumably not be required.
We can also, we have a sticker that we can add, but it is usually included on a formal site plan, is the ruled box for the signatures, so.
Well, that's why I asked whether we needed to generate
to
a
generate
formal
new-
site
a-
plan.
a new-
Madam Chairman,
Yes,
there has to be a plan on file
for this
that was
property,
built.
yeah.
So that could be, pull the plan out and use that plan, because nothing other than the sewer and the septic has changed that I know of in that place.
Right,
So I'm sure that would be adequate for us.
to pull the original plan, yeah. So we need to do some research
Yeah,
on
we
that.
have a 1992, I believe it is, site plan, which shows the 24 spaces among other things.
Okay, all right.
But again, there are no exterior changes. That's why I was trying to avoid both the cost and, more importantly, the time of a site plan.
Right.
It would be 4 or 5
Madam
months.
Chairman, I think that would work. Plus, there has to be a plan of the drainage for that building.
Yeah.
I know the people that built that.
So we just need to see that. The thing is, Mr. Litchfield, the board has taken on as its practice, if anything comes before us, we just need to see that all of our site plan criteria are satisfied. And if the available site plan, the historical site plan, even though nothing is changed, if it doesn't satisfy and give us all the information needed on our site plan criteria, we do require an updated site plan. So as long as what's on file does give us the information we need for all of our site plan review criteria, that's adequate. We only require it in the event that information is missing.
Thank you.
Or something does need to be upgraded, which often is the case.
To ask a question together with a sort of a comment, the applicant proposes to be a tenant and doesn't have any involvement with the exterior, and there are no changes. I have something from 1992, and I assume Katie's files probably are the same thing. So presumably, when the property was constructed, which I believe was shortly thereafter, municipal files should have what you might be looking for.
Okay, as long as it does, we're fine. This one has a stamp on it from 2017 with the signature of the planning board chair at that time, Peter Kokolis. So you've submitted something. As long as this gives us all the information that we need, we're all right.
Thank you. I think we can probably make a determination that nothing's changed in the exterior since 2017, but I'll speak with Katie in that regard.
All right, that sounds good.
And Madam Chair?
Yes, Warren?
Also, with respect to the dumpster, I think it would be appropriate to locate it on
Sure.
the proposed site plan, because I think it affects where parking might be possible or impossible based on the location of that dumpster in the rear of the building. And the tenants tend to park in the back, so their interests as well could be considered as to the siting of the dumpster in addition to where the hauling company wants to put it, so.
We appreciate that.
Great. Yes, Bahab.
And you should not bring those kinds of pictures to us.
No.
We haven't-
We haven't eaten yet.
We will
And I
save,
have
we'll save samples for the formal site plan review.
And I have a really important question. Are any of these gluten-free? They really look delicious.
The answer was that, unfortunately, you
great.
can't speak from there, but the answer is most of them are sourdough.
All right, and apparently that is all right for gluten-free, is what you're suggesting. Is that correct, or not quite? No.
If you're not celiac.
Okay, great. Anyway, they do look delicious.
Do we need a motion on this?
Yes, we do. Yes, we need a motion to accept the preliminary site plan.
No, I move to accept.
All right,
Second it.
all right, and let's do a roll call. Bob
Bob
Borchafter,
Wirtschafter, yes.
Art Spru,
Art Spru, yes?
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
and Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus, approve.
And this
Well,
is
wait a minute,
Catherine.
I'm approving as long as I get a taste of that.
I also approve. So you've heard the comments from the board, so we look forward to
Thank
seeing
you.
you
We
at the
will
formal.
attend to those issues as soon as possible, work with Katie and locate the dumpster, deal with the other issues that Mr. Chain and Mr. Spruce mentioned. We thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Litchfield. All right, so now our next item on the agenda is a formal site plan review, and this is for 365 Main Street with the town of Chatham. This is a proposed visitor center and parking area. This matter was continued from the November 14th meeting, and I believe we have Mr. Raber presenting. Is that correct?
Indeed.
Please
Yes,
introduce
can you hear
yourself
me?
and your team. Please go ahead.
Okay, my name's Kurt Raber, and I'm an architect with Catalyst Architecture and Interiors in Yarmouthport. Also online tonight is our site civil engineer, Dave McNevich from Coastal Engineering in Orleans. And we're here to present some 4 revised drawings and hopefully answer any outstanding questions about this site plan.
All right,
So, yeah,
so,
I think I'll start by sharing my screen. And hopefully you can see that.
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, great. So this is the revised civil engineering plan. And the other sheets in this set include some drainage details, an architectural colored site plan, which is going to take a second to load. There we go. And also a lighting plan. But if we could start here on this architectural plan, I'll go through some of the changes we added to the layout and so forth, and speak a little bit about EV charging stations, some other site amenities and site furnishings, then the lighting, and then maybe I'll pass it back to David and we'll talk about drainage and some technical site plan issues. So I think as the board's very aware, the town owns this parcel, was formerly the Eldridge Garage. Several structures long since been removed. So we're proposing a new kind of public rest station, public parking area, and currently in the summers, this is facilitated by use of a valet company to strategically park far more cars in the small lot than would normally be possible in a standard lined parking arrangement. And as a result, we propose to pave and kind of with hard asphalt paving, but the left side of the plan and the entrance driveway, of course. The rear side of the site, which is to the right of the layout here, with the existing tree, would be gravel. And so that would be the area for dense parking by the valet. And of course, in winter, it's kind of open parking, but without so much demand. The building is a replication of the existing Eldridge Garage little filling station building that's currently in the location shown by this dotted line. Our proposed building mimics the size, roof proportions, roof shape, And of course, it moves it forward a little bit to facilitate better flow through the parking lot. And we have a landscape plan that was previously submitted. And so the green areas here are the planted softscape areas. The tan is sort of the sidewalk hardscaped areas out in front of the building. And we've located several site amenities to kind of play off the idea that this was a sort of a rest station, a filling station. So we'll have a historic gas pump, some benches, bike racks, rubbish containers, and down at the other entrance, the other end of the site, we've got a pedestrian access to the parking area. We've added 2 more trash bins here for trash and recycling, another bench, and we added over in the rear part of the site, which is sort of more of a walking area, respite area, 2 more benches around this little walking trail, and again, a dog waste station, which would presumably have also, dog waste collection bag, dispenser of some kind there. And the biggest change is the layout of the parking right here that's parallel with Main Street. And we've incorporated, along with the town's consulting engineers that are working on a grant to fund the installation of EV chargers or electric vehicle chargers. And they're proposing 2 level 2 chargers that are located here and here between 2 spaces. Again, each type of charger or each charging area, so this would be one charging site, has to have a handicap parking space associated with the charger. So this charger would have 2 cables potentially charging 2 vehicles here. The second level 2 charger would charge cars parked in this area. And then the latter 2, or the western 2 chargers would be, are proposed to be level 3 chargers, which are the fast chargers. So these charge cars in as little as 20 minutes, much higher amperage. And some cars are capable of using that currently. Most cars on the road, from what I understand, use the level 2. But the engineers working on the EV implementation across several town properties strongly recommended that we have the 2 types of chargers to serve both types of vehicles. Of course, we have the requisite handicap parking and curb cuts to access the sidewalks there. The balance of the paved area is covering, again, the lower portion of the site, and is intended to be, sort of busy year-round, especially at the EV charging stations. This little flat area out here, sidewalk area, and the little room inside the building here is intended for use of the valet company so that they can control access in peak season and control parking of cars up in the gravel area. Quickly, I'll go over to last time we were with you, talked about adding site lighting, and we consulted with some electrical engineers who suggested 4 parking lot pole fixtures, and they would be generally located in this area, and these would be LED fixtures, of course, for energy conservation, but they would throw the light in this, and generally in this pattern, and illuminate most of the parking area. Previously, we had shown lamp posts along our sidewalk and out in front of the building, and I think we have previously submitted on these lamp posts. The second lamp post is proposed to be a 16-foot total height, so it would be a 14-foot aluminum pole on a 24-inch concrete base, and then the arm to these fixtures is variable in length from 24 to 48 inches. So we'd probably go with a 48-inch arm to get that head out over the paved area. We picked a couple of light fixtures, but because this is a public bid, we'll be selecting 3 and having 3 equal fixtures in our specification at the time of bidding this project. So let me go back to the front page. And David, I can zoom in and move around at your command, but why don't you walk us through sort of the site plan edits that we've made since we were last in front of the board here?
Sure. So for the most part catching up to the changes to the site layout that were brought in by Catalyst. Excuse me. The last time we met, information about where the sewer connection would supply line, electric line for the building. And then more detail about the drainage stormwater recharge basin that's located in the parking lot. There was sort of some questions about the capacity of the inlet grates of catch basin 1 that was in the parking lot. We converted that to a double grate catch basin, which is more than adequate for the amount of runoff that's going to be coming to that low point in the parking lot. The stormwater report shows that the peak inflow rate into that or runoff to that catch basin is about 2.85 cubic feet per second. And that double grate catch basin, when it's, even if it were ponded to no more than or 4 inches, that would be able to receive almost 14 cubic feet per second. So many times greater than what is required for that. I know there's been some questions about catch basin 2, which is in the southwest corner of the parking lot, in the gravel parking lot. And that area, that corner where that catch basin is proposed is now another one of the existing low points on the property. So we're sort of mirroring what's going on in terms of drainage pattern going towards that corner. The ground elevation there at that corner or in that area is just slightly above elevation 26. And we're proposing that the catch basin rim would be at elevation, or the parking lot and catch basin rim would be elevation 27. But as you can see on the drawing, we're showing a spot elevation of 27.5 behind that, where there's a new number that says 0.06 feet. It's indicating from the survey drawing. But the intent is to keep the low point at the very southwest corner of the property that exists there, create the catch basin rim as the low point of the parking lot. But the idea is to sort of carry an earth berm around the back side of that so that we are isolating any parking lot runoff from the natural low point in that southwest corner of the property to maintain that existing grade. So that's what our intent is on that. And I think that was really the focus of the questions on the utilities. We added some details about what the cross-section of the pavement and pavement base looks like. Same thing for the gravel portion of the parking lot. And that's it for now for me, and I'll try to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Yes, Bob Dubus, please go ahead.
David, this is Bob Dubus. I don't know if you can see anybody here or not, but there was a note by Bob Duncanson about between the pavement and the stone parking lot. And so I'm sure that you probably know this, but in the business, we call that a club foot. At the edge of the pavement, we dig down about 4 inches and about a foot wide, and we step that down so that the stone can overlap 6 inches of it and then butt against the parking lot with about 2.5 inches, so that we call it a club foot so it doesn't break off. And it's been very successful in my practice.
We can certainly do that, and happy to add that detail.
Well, that would answer Bob Dickinson's question.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay. Art, did you want to go ahead? Start.
Yeah, thank you. I think a couple of questions from the previous meeting that we had. One was the circulation of the shuttle. There's still going to be a shuttle. I think, Bob, you had brought that up, and I didn't hear any explanation during the presentation about how that circulation would work. I'm assuming there still would be a shuttle.
If I could
Oh, sure.
answer. So the intent right now, the utilization is of the company that's operating the valets, or the parking lot attendants and the valet that use golf carts for shuttles. And at this point in time, a determination about a shuttle, any type of larger shuttle has not been determined at this point in time. So that there's nothing like that set in stone. The existing valet company does use shuttles, but they're small golf cart size, and I don't believe that they're intending anything larger at this point in time.
Okay, well, Katie, just so you know that there would be no ability to do a circulation on the site the way it's laid out if all the cars are parked in that lot. So they would be stuck to do something in the gravel area at the back, assuming that there's no cars in there. But I think if anyone is considering that, whether it's now or 2 years from now or 5 years now, they should look at it. Now, not that you have to put it in place now, but it would make sense to think about a shuttle, because the whole purpose of this is to get back and forth. One of them is to get back and forth to Lighthouse Beach.
Right,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
right, and again, the shuttle that's being used is a smaller, it's a very small golf cart size.
Okay.
Katie, I think
Shuttle.
that my recollection of my concern when the issue was raised previously was specifically because we're talking small golf cart types of things that are going to be offloading and unloading passengers right in the middle of cars exiting and entering the parking lot, with no consideration as to a specific designated space where that would happen, or any protection for the people that are getting on or off of these shuttles, golf carts, whatever you wish to call it. And then when they may have a break or have a third one they can bring into service or something, it needs a place to live. It needs a place to park, to be, and there's no place unless you leave it on the sidewalk or something. The whole idea was to try and provide a safe way to get people on and off of the golf carts and to have a place for them to park if they were not on the road literally 100% of the time. And it seems to be missing from this proposed site plan.
Did you want to comment, Katie? Or?
Sure, and we are looking at the larger issue of parking and shuttles at this point in time, but nothing has been determined. So the site had been designed based on the current use and how the operator had been utilizing the site. So I can ask Kurt to talk to, whether or not the considerations were made or what options they see for a shuttle in the future. It is something that has been talked about, so I don't know, Kurt, if you...
Yeah, I'm just going to share the plan quick again. Happy to talk about it. currently the consultant or the vendor to the town who operates the shuttle has control of the entire parking property. So if they get to control the access to the cars coming in, and I've only tried to get into that lot twice during the summer, but both times it was too full to take me. But I remember seeing that the golf carts were in this lower corner, I guess northeast corner of the lot. And they were parked in this general location. And when people did come in, they were able to leave their key with the valet. The valet went off and parked the car and sometimes very densely stacked them on this rear side. And then those people were standing right by the building here and were immediately asked to get on the golf cart, and then they were taken around town. Again, I've only watched that happen. I haven't participated in it, but clearly if that vendor has control of the whole parcel, they can use these spaces here for the golf carts coming and going. And then they would valet park the cars more densely in the back half. If the town were to change the arrangement with the vendor in the future, and the front paved area became more of a come and go as transient parking, and especially for the EV spots, then that vendor could sort of set up that same sort of partition of the two lots here where the paving and the unpaved areas meet, and the golf carts could be in this general location so that their customers would come in, leave the car with an attendant, immediately get on the golf cart and leave the property. But depends on the vendor and their relationship, whether they control the whole parcel or not.
Well, I have no doubt that the vendors will do whatever they need to do to make their business work when they're there. My concern is, you've just described, we're going to have people getting on and off golf carts, crossing 2 lanes of traffic, ingress and egress from the parking lot at a time when they're quite often full. So you're going to have people running across those 2 lanes of traffic to try and get a seat on it. Many people will not park their car to get on that shuttle. They will be there walking down Main Street, or they've just had lunch or whatever. And even if there was no problem with other members of the board, because I'm anxious about safety of the little kids that are running to the beach and whatever, carrying beach balls and everything else that they drop and are falling under cars that are coming and going. There's no signage as to where they're supposed to go. There's no protection for the passengers or the people walking to and from these areas. It would seem to me that in the long term, it may be totally different, but on day one, I don't think we want to have a safety hazard created by the town on purpose.
And you put it right in the area where the cars coming in get out, and they're stacked up, and there are people waiting to get their car on the other side going out, and those are going to get stacked up with people. And there's nowhere, as I can tell, where all those people are supposed to stand while they're waiting for their cars without getting in the way of the shuttle. So I think there's too much stuff in that corner. If we go back to that picture, let's assume that we have five cars trying to get into the parking lot. First couple open their doors. Now you have somewhat of a jammed up street and vision blocking people going left, trying to go left. Now you have cars coming out of the parking lot while people are standing there waiting for the valet to bring their car. So where they're standing in the street, or they're standing right there, and if you have 2 or 3 cars show up at the same time, which you're going to need to keep this thing flowing, you now have a car stuck in front of that place that you thought you were putting your shuttles. It's absolutely going to be a disaster of car mess, and I think Warren's absolutely right. Some little kid has got to get to the beach and is running you know, their mom and dad have all this stuff in their hands. There's got to be a better way to move the traffic around for those three
Well-
very important functions that are done and you have them all in the same little spot.
I mean, it seems to me they'll end up having the golf cart stopping on Main Street because they can't get in and out, and the cars can't get in and out all at the same time without creating a heck of a mess, and they're just going to stop on Main Street, and that's not exactly what you want to do.
Well, I don't know if that's wrong. I think if you put a stop with a nice, you know, bus stop container and said, go over here to get on, and you come around and get off from that spot, then you take it out of the parking lot.
Well, you're creating more than just the cart stopping on Main Street. There's a plan there.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree, but the way but the way that it's described now is a safety hazard of in the waiting.
Yeah. I think we have to have we need to have a clearly defined passageway of ingress and egress of cars, where people wait to get their car, where people wait to get the shuttle. How many golf carts are there? Is it going to be 5? Is it going to be 2? Everything needs to be more clearly defined, and the pathways in and out for every category, pedestrians, vehicles, and shuttles, needs to be clearly defined so that we can see that everything's, you know, not clogging up in that one corner, which right now it does look like it's not clearly defined and it could be a safety hazard. Yeah.
Madam Chair?
The other
Yes.
thing is this tended parking 24/7, 365 days a year? Or is it only during the critical months of the summer? And what happens if you don't have this service during those off months?
I think Katie wants to make a comment.
Right,
Please go
actually,
ahead.
so just to follow up what Art was just saying, the intended use for this to be utilized as a operated by a parking attendant and with the valet or with the shuttle service is intended to be for the busy times of the year. So say
Okay.
between, say, Memorial Day and Labor Day.
Okay.
The rest of the year, it's intended to just be a regular parking lot with self-parking.
Okay.
When the company has control of the site, as they do now, they will determine based with what they utilize is they use their cones, they use signage to direct people to the appropriate flow of traffic. And that's what is intended for the busy times of year. It's not intended that there will be a shuttle year-round or, you know, that they will be operating the parking lot on a year-round basis. The operation will only take place during the busy months. So again, as you're looking for information on the plan, it's difficult for that to be provided because this is intended to be a parking lot 12 months out of the year. It's intended to serve the valet or with the valet and the shuttle for 3 months out of the year. And again, the valet will then determine and direct traffic based on the way they see the site needing to be laid out for their operation. And so that's what they've done. If you've driven by there at all, during the past couple of summers, you'll see that they have cones set up. They have signage directing people which way in and which way out, where to go, where to meet the shuttle. And I anticipate that will continue to happen through their signage and their operation of the lot.
I agree with my fellow board members, though, that there needs to be a concept here. And right now, we don't see a concept that's going to be safe from valet. Putting cones out is not going to solve the issues that were raised by the board members. There needs to be an arrangement of how that should be. It's very common for shuttles to be drop off here, you continue forward, and you circulate around. I don't see that here. If you're going to start backing vehicles up at the driveway entrance, you're creating an obstruction, you're creating a challenge and an issue. So I think there needs to be a concept of how that is all going to be arranged so that during the months of the congested times during the summer, there's a clear pathway for pedestrians, and then there is also for the vehicles that are shuttle, as well as the vehicles that are coming on and off the parking lot. I just don't know how you do that just by putting cones out there. That doesn't solve anything.
And I think the parking company, managers, whoever it is, will do what they can with what they're handed, with cones or people or who knows what. But I don't think we should hand them something that is an extraordinarily difficult problem to deal with rather than something that has been thought through. So there's a process, a flow, a plan. We understand what you're doing, and we've tried to build this such that it'll be easy for you, not hard. And if it's only part of the year, then part of the things that are there don't necessarily even need to be permanent, I suppose. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would have thought there was enough time to have some thought put into this, and I'm not seeing any thought that has gone into it, other than we'll just leave it to the parking concessionaire. And I'm not happy with leaving the safety of the kids getting on that shuttle bus to whoever they could hire as a temp for the summer. It just doesn't seem to me that's prudent for the town.
Can I ask, this is a shuttle that just goes to Lighthouse Beach and comes back, or does it go through town?
It goes to the lighthouse, and they have taken other people to other areas in town as well.
So they'll go wherever you want?
Within reason, I think right around the Main Street area, yes. And I would think that at some point in time would like to see them, probably go
In
to
the
the fish
past,
pier as well.
it's a paid parking area, and so they'll take you anywhere down Main Street that you want to go shopping, so.
Well, I like that idea. I just, either they need to make money doing the shuttle, or it has to be sort of town-wide, and you can get on and off, and it goes from around the circle up to the lighthouse and back, and just keeps doing that. And we have 4 or 5 spots in town where you can get on or off, one of which would be in front of this garage. But, I mean, the idea that we're gonna have, I just don't see how this works to anybody's advantage to have this parking lot running their own little shuttle on golf carts, when we should be moving all the town around instead of having people driving through there. If it went to the community center and came around here and went to Lighthouse and back, that makes so much more sense to me as a means to move people around.
Yes, Katie,
So
please go ahead.
That concept is being explored, but nothing has been put into place at this point in time. But we are looking at a potential pilot program for a shuttle that would do just that, would allow for folks to park at the outer lots, if you will, community center, maybe even the middle school, if the school district was amenable to that, and to be able to bring people through town. The idea, though, and a few years back, this was looked at, and one of the concerns was that a larger shuttle would need to be kind of on the outskirts and not necessarily going along Main Street just because of the traffic congestion. We are looking at various options, but what we have in place or have had in place up until this past summer is a contract with a company called Chatham Valet, who has utilized, based on they charge $15 for the day for parking, and that includes them taking you to Lighthouse Beach or again, someplace else along Main Street in town. That's how they have operated the past, I think, 4 summers. And I think that, the intention would be that if they were successful in, the contract again, that's how they would continue to operate for the time being until we figure out a larger conversation about a shuttle around town. But that is being explored.
Art, yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so, so during the summer months, I'm just trying to understand the full picture of this. During the summer months, there's paid parking, $15. What happens in the off months? Is this an open parking for anybody to pull in there and park by themselves and then walk or wherever
That was the intent of,
with
yes.
no fee?
Yes, that was the intent of
Okay.
the Eldridge Garage Property Planning
Right.
Committee.
Okay, yeah, all right, that's good. So the area in the back then, which when the valet is there, they may be using that differently than when the valet is not in there. So it would be good and helpful if you put some curb stops there in each of the ends, along the front and the back, so that it designates people to park, because otherwise they just park anywhere and willy-nilly. I mean, curb stops are set up so that they're about the width of a vehicle that's in a parking space. You put one wherever, and it could be off the way, so it doesn't have to involve impacts to vehicles that you would want to park in a valet fashion, versus having the regular customer just park up there. There could be special events during these other, call it 8 or 9 months, that warrants having that many vehicles there, and it would be a great place to go park. But I think we should help some of the customers out who come there so that they have some designated areas on where they can go. A lot
We
of the
can
parking
start with
lots that we
first night.
have, with Max and that, we got arrows all over the place in the parking lot so they know where to go. You go this way when you go into Max. So, I mean, it's the way that you have to sort of guide some of the customers that are out there, because otherwise they'll just drive any place willy-nilly out there. And I think there has to be some organization of this for when the valet's there and when there's not valet there. And I think when there's drop-offs and when there's no drop-offs, I think all of that needs to be part of this, unless it's just gonna be an open plan or a valet plan all the way, all right? And that's not what I'm hearing. So you got two plans that you need to designate here, and they both should be worked out in advance and shared. And then there should be information that is conveyed to the community so that they know what to do when there is or there isn't a valet service in there.
Arthur?
Yeah.
Would putting parking bumpers along the back edge of the stone parking lot be sufficient for you?
Well, I guess so. I mean, I think that would sort of help designate it. The other way you can take a look at it is the spaces that are on the paved area. They're gonna be striped, so you'll see that there's designated areas. People are gonna wanna just naturally park their vehicle up that way. So something like that would make sense, yes. Just a couple other things. You have lots of electrical here. I'm assuming it's gonna be underground. I have no information on a plan that says that this, all the power for these electrical charging stations, the light poles and all of that, there's gonna be a lot of underground cable. There's nothing shown on the plan. Generally, working with electrical engineers like I have, they don't like to do that. That's a site guy person. So is somebody gonna show some of these utilities on the plan?
Yes.
Whether they're now or later, because if somebody's gonna do some work on this site later on and you have all these electrical conduits with some of it fairly high powered lines, we need to know where all of this is after everything is all said and done.
If I may,
Yeah.
this is Kurt again. Currently, there's overhead power lines that come from across the street over to a utility pole in the northeast corner of the site. And this pad right here is what we've envisioned while coordinating our effort with the engineers that are working for the town on the placement and the funding for the EVs, is that hopefully they'll be constructed simultaneously. But the EVs, charging stations will probably use more power than our proposed building.
Yep.
So that engineer is already working with Eversource on power needs on multiple project sites. And the hope is that we will come underground with an electric service to a pad-mounted transformer in this location. And from that transformer, we'll feed the building, and then on a separate set of meters, the electric vehicle charging stations will be energized and metered separately.
Okay, so all
So
of those electrical utilities will be underground though, once they're on site, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so,
And the circumference of the site will have that site lighting circuit as well to energize all of our parking lighting.
right, okay. Well, I think we need all of that information on the plans. If your electrical engineer doesn't have that all worked out, we need an as-built associated with it, because there's gonna be a lot of conduit out there, and if anybody puts a shovel on the ground, they're gonna yank something up.
And that would certainly be our intent, because we've got two different design teams working on
Yeah.
two different solutions with two separate
Yep.
sets of funding. So the idea is to coordinate all that work and hope that they get done simultaneously. Certainly, we wouldn't want to pave this parking lot and then not have the conduits in place for all the future EV chargers, even if these projects became so staggered somehow.
That was my next question is if the charging stations don't happen right away, are you still gonna get the conduits in? Because otherwise, you're gonna be ripping off sidewalk or pavement or something
Yes.
else. Okay, that's a good,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I would suggest, if I could, that, once we have we get past the site plan review, and get into detailed construction documents that we could submit, to the board, for review or for record,
Yeah.
proposed, electrical engineering drawings. And then, of course, during our contract, we will require as-built to be maintained by the contractor.
Okay. Just one last, just a plan notation error, or misstatement on the scale. Your plan on drawing number, this is your site plan, C2.1.1. It shows a scale of 1 inch equals 5 feet. I think it's 1 inch equals 20 feet, and you should correct that.
That's correct. I noticed that this evening.
Okay,
Thank you.
good.
We'll correct that.
Good, we're both thinking on the same wavelength, yeah. I don't want to misconstrue either construction documents or bidding documents. They don't want to get caught on any of that, so I just picked up on that right away. Okay, that's about all I have right now.
Okay. I think have we heard from everybody? Bob, do you have another comment?
I have one more question. This is more for Katie, I think. Now, the hotel next door and the restaurant next door, they did have an agreement to use that parking lot for parking spaces. Are they still going to use that for parking spaces?
They do not have an agreement with the town, and
Well,
so.
we had an agreement in order for them to have the seating that they have, that they use that parking lot, and they were allowed to use that.
Yes.
So what, they do not have an agreement with the town. What they do is that my understanding is that they work with the valet company and they pay the valet company when folks park in their parking lot.
Okay, that's-
So it's
I-
not directly with the town, but
All right.
yes.
Thank you. You answered the question.
Okay.
The other thing is, David, looking at the plan, where it says Eldridge Garage on the corner, coming in by the corner of the building, driving from Main Street, it would be in the back right corner. Could that be angled or taken out, and so a golf cart could stop there and be loaded? Do you follow where I am? It says
Sorry,
Eldridge
you want to
Garage
put the
in the
plan back
thin,
up?
in the dark line. And if you cut that corner off, that might make a stop for the golf cart.
Oh, I see.
Make sure.
Sure, are you saying that?
Yeah, just
Yeah,
an
we can
angled
share that
cut.
plan.
Excuse me, angle cut.
If you bring that up a little more, right there, David.
Oh, right here.
Right there. Would that work?
I guess it could be, the radius could be increased, but ever so slightly. The broken line here is the, let's see. This line right here is the edge of roof. So the roof overhangs the building back here. And this hardscape area here goes under the canopy. It's this area here is we expected was the interaction between the arriving car and the parking attendant, telling them either to pull forward or leave the cars there.
So there's an overhang in there that people could stand under?
Yes.
So if you angled where it said Eldridge Garage, you could sneak a golf cart in there, and the people would be right there under the overhang to walk and get in it, instead of walking across the street in both sides of traffic. I'm sure that you could finagle something, whether you cut it a little short and brought it over. And besides, how wide is the entrance? Is it a 24-foot wide entrance?
It is.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you have a little bit of room to finagle the curb in there, to sneak in a cart. I'm pretty sure you can make that work.
You're talking about a golf cart that's like 3 feet or so wide, something like that?
No, the little blue ones, they have a six passenger or 8 passenger, I think.
Yeah, the ones they was using
But it's
last
no
year.
wider than a regular golf cart. I mean, it would fit in there. It would be safer for people traversing the lot, because they're all going to go right to the visitor center.
Right.
And that would eliminate going across the entrance. And you might have to move the building 2 or 3 feet back
Right.
to the,
Yes,
to
you
to
would have to
the
move the
west.
building.
You have an eraser, you know that? You can just erase it and make it over, put it over a little bit.
And if Bob can come up with a
Maybe
good
that's what's-
solution in no time at all, then I'm sure that the engineers can come up with a couple others, and
That's just a thought, David.
Yeah. You would have to
Hey,
move the
Bob,
building
thanks for
back.
your comment.
And maybe so you're thinking that we would want to see a designated area where, how many golf carts do they use, 3 or 4?
One at a time.
One at a
Only
time.
one. Only one.
Yeah, they
Well,
fill
one
it up,
has
it
to come
goes.
in and unload and load. That's the issue. Where the other 2 are they're on the road or they're parked in the back somewhere.
At least they have a spot.
Yeah.
But-
Did you have a
but
comment,
the-
Katie?
The golf cart could be right here,
Yeah.
parallel with the back of the building. Because remember, in high season, when the valet company has control of the whole site, there aren't cars coming and going. The valets are just,
Yeah, I
Or
see,
move it.
that would even work there, even if you cut the corner a little bit so they could sneak by. But at least that's an answer to the question right in there. Or one of them, I'm sure there's many.
Did you have a comment, Katie?
I was just going to say that the company had 2 golf carts.
2, yeah,
one-
okay. Okay. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, are we done with golf carts and parking? Because I'm going on. I want to talk about the lighting just a little bit more.
Okay.
Do you have, I'd like to see the lights. Do you know how many lumens you're producing, or how much area you're actually illuminating, and at what foot candles, or any of that stuff? I also wondered, I'm going to ask that these be controlled so they're not on full when there's nobody in the parking lot. Either a timer, or better yet, a motion detection that will go from 10-20% light to 50% light, and then you always have the option of going to 100% light if you really need to light up the place. But with the amount of light there, I'm thinking the thing will be, a nuisance to the hotel if it's still being brightly lit at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So I think that's a concern. Even though it's going straight down, it's an awful lot of light that wasn't there before for the hotel guests.
and the abutters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is hedgerows and fences on both sides. Our graphics do kind of encroach over the fence here, but the light would not. These both fixtures are dark sky compliant. They're LED. Depending on the manufacturer we end up with, I'm not sure how dimmable they are, but certainly they'll all have capability for electric eye to go off. So photo sensor, they won't be on needlessly. And of course, the town has control over what time they'll go off. And in the summer, I'm not sure what time the valet company ceases operations, but certainly in the summer, you could have a certain set of hours, and then come about the swing seasons or the winter season, you could have a different hours of operation.
Well, that's the time I'm worried about, is when it's open parking, I'm thinking the Squire closes and people or whatever are walking down here at 11 o'clock at night or even later. And if it's turned off, it's dark and nobody can, that's not safe. So they make controllers for parking lots that keep them at 10 or 20%. And then if you walk under it, it'll light it up a little bit more so you can see your car without being disruptive, and they're energy efficient. So I think you should be looking into how this parking lighting is controlled instead of just having it on or off. I mean, at these sizes, the dimmable isn't going to cost that much different than when it isn't dimmable in this day and age.
Yes, Warren.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't know if it's normally on a site plan like this, but there's going to be a lot of trash and recycling in the summer here. A lot. Anybody coming from or to the beach is going to have stuff. They're going to, and with the turnover, and it does seem to me that there needs to be an explicit provision that's likely to be very public and probably much larger than it might otherwise be in other places in this location for recycling as well as trash, which is then, if you end up in the dumpster world, then you've got to figure out where you're going to put it. And I don't see an obvious place to put it.
But we wouldn't want a dumpster, sir. We've shown, just like the rest of Main Street has, pairs of recycling and trash bins in a couple of locations. And I believe that the DPW makes rounds daily and empties trash and recycling bins up and down Main Street. So we weren't going to take away parking count to add a dumpster, because in our experience, dumpsters in public parking lots get used for anything and everything by everybody. So that would probably be a security problem.
Where is it envisioned those bins would be on this? And up next to the visitor center?
On both, right here on the sidewalk on the northwest corner, and then right in the hardscape area at the next to the visitor center. And then, of course, inside the visitor center, we'll have additional waste collection.
Okay, and there'll be some water fountains somewhere around in here too, I assume.
Yes.
I didn't actually see them on the plan. I just would ask you to take notice that there's going to be a significantly larger volume of both recycling and trash because of the beach traffic. Everybody will take every shred of everything that was at the beach, every sandwich that got full of sand and so on, many more consumable soft drinks and so on than you would get down on Main Street where you have a recycling bin. And if the bins can handle it, that is fine. One other comment that sort of dovetails with the electrical plan and planning for the future, that I'm very much opposed to having a food truck in this place, but at the same time, there are many town facilities such as Kate Gould Park and the community center and so on, and I don't want a food truck there.
I think Katie has a comment about that.
Excuse me?
The food truck regulations do not allow for a food truck in this location.
Oh, I'm not hearing, I'm sorry.
The food truck regulations that were adopted by the select board do not allow for a food truck in this location.
So there is no food
There
truck
is-
here.
there will be no-
And
there would
will
not be a food truck
here.
And which regulations don't permit it?
The mobile food vending regulations that were adopted by the select board last spring.
Do
Well,
not- do
we
not
didn't have a
allow-
parking lot there either,
It was
so.
specifically discussed, and there will not be a food truck at this location. It was also part of the agreement that was made with the donor.
So that this will put the east end of Main Street at a significant disadvantage to Kate Gould Park for special events and the community center and other places for, I don't know, it might be first night, it might be Music on Main or something where as a special event sometime in the future, somebody in the select board can change their mind. My only thought was that it would make some sense to, while you're digging things up and putting conduit in the ground, there might be a place to have an electrical outlet for whatever purpose, be it a food truck or something else. And the obvious place would be up in the gravel section on the east end of the parking area, probably right up close to one of those light poles. But rather than have the decision made sometime in the future and then have to either put up with the noise of a generator or it could be Music on Main. There's nowhere, really to necessarily hook up and do things. I'm just trying to think of things happen in the future. And the time to try and spend very, very little to put in some utility hookups that could be used is now, not later, that's all. But if it's already been determined that irrevocably and for no reason can the select board ever decide to have a special event in that parking lot, so be it.
Did you have a comment, Katie?
Yeah, it was just, there was concerns from the neighbors because this parking lot, unlike many others, is actually surrounded by residential
Yeah.
abutters. And so it was determined that this was not the appropriate location for a food truck to be located. That does not mean that during Mondays on Main or another special event, that a food truck couldn't locate, further down on a private commercial property during a special event. Special events are typically different. It was determined that food trucks would not be allowed on the Eldridge Garage site. So just wanted to specify.
Okay, I just think we need to sort of pull this together and come to some kind of decision whether, I'm hearing that the board is still feeling there's a lot of issues with the design. So I need to get a sense of the board if we feel that we could approve this site plan as submitted with conditions, or whether we need to continue to a future meeting and request some revisions and additional information. So I just want to get a sense of the board. I've been hearing that there's a lot of issues, yeah.
I think there's a few issues that could be worked out, but I think we should make this plan go forward. We're wasting time in town's money and everybody else's. We've said what we thought we'd like to see.
Right.
But it's the town. They can change their mind and do whatever they want. We've made ourselves known, but I think we should vote this plan in. And we hope that
So, Bob,
working here tonight will produce some fruit.
so would you add conditions? I mean, I think the staff report includes our standard conditions.
Right.
So would you,
But
are there some
special
specific
conditions,
conditions that you'd want to add so that we would approve it with conditions
I
tonight?
like Bob's lighting issue, which I think is a good one, that it varies. Instead, they just don't shine at 11 o'clock at night when somebody walks in to get their car. That it is step graded. I like that idea. That was a good idea. I like the idea of having the shuttle have a little spot, and they seem to be able to work that out. I believe that ductwork in the ground now will save a lot in the future. I'm a big fan of doing that. These are minor things compared to what could be. The drainage is fine, everything, I think
Okay.
everything else is fine.
Yeah, I'd
Okay.
add one more. I think
Yes.
Art's suggestion of having the curbs on the back end, just, or something painted, just at the rear.
Wait a minute, I thought that was my idea.
Well, it was. All right,
Thanks, Art.
all right.
But no, I think that's a good idea
Parking
too.
curbs at the rear.
From what, it gives a designated spot.
Right.
And they can work around that when they park in the summer, they can park them anywhere.
Yeah.
So parking curbs
Other
at
than
the
that,
rear, is that?
I think we're doing pretty
Trying
good.
to-
Yeah.
So step-graded lighting, specific spot for shuttle parking and pickup, correct?
Yep.
And drop-off. And designated spot for specific
On the
designation.
back of the stone parking lot. That way people will get the idea when nobody's there.
Do we want to specify that it's on the back of the gravel parking lot? So specific.
That's correct.
Specific
please.
designated spot for shuttle pickup, drop-off, and parking on the rear of the gravel parking lot. So that's an additional.
No.
No.
No. So what is it you want?
Designated
Designated?
parking bumpers on the back of the parking lot.
Yes, okay, that's a different condition.
Right.
Yes, designated parking
Shuttle-
bumpers on the back
shuttle
of the
bus,
parking lot.
The shuttle golf cart, whatever you want to
Yes.
call it, needs, somewhere around that building, it needs a pickup and drop off.
A designated location.
Right.
And
Yes,
stri-
okay,
yeah.
So we don't
Designate.
walk across
Right.
traffic coming in.
All right. All right, so the parking curbs, you want it on the gravel or on the?
On the ground, right here.
Just on the gravel piece.
And here, there's striping. Okay, great. All right. So we're adding 3 conditions as I see it now. This,
Four, electrical conduit layouts.
okay,
We'd like some appropriateness for the future electric lighting or future
Charging station.
charging station, there you go.
okay, electrical conduit
Even if they put a
layouts.
couple main lines down in the gravel, they can go from there back and forth, just underneath the asphalt, so we don't have to tear it up.
Okay, all right. So we're adding 4 conditions. We don't need the condition of do we need the condition of the performance bond?
No, it's
We
a
usually
town
don't do
project.
that. It's a town project, so we can eliminate that condition. So we're going to eliminate standard condition number 3.
Three, right.
And we're going to add conditions, 4 conditions, one requiring step-graded lighting, a specific designated spot for shuttle pickup, drop-off, and parking.
Hopefully, so nobody has to cross the entrance.
Okay, to avoid
Agreed.
pedestrian crossing of the entrance driveway.
Well, then do you have a separate pickup and a separate drop-off? Or-
No,
No.
Well, then
Turn around,
somebody's going to have to cross the.
there's only 2.
There's only two.
I know, but you come on, you park your car, you get out, and you go right to it, or you come and you have to walk across to the other side to get to your car.
You're gonna have to walk across the other side. Come on
Yes.
now, let's.
Right,
you
and
know.
that's what I'm saying, there's one pickup and one drop-off, then you wouldn't, but if there's just one designated place to drop
To do
off
both pickup and
then
drop-off.
somebody's crossing.
Well, they're gonna, you cross the street every day.
I know. I just
can't-
was,
We're trying to make it as safe as we can. We can't hold a hand.
I understand, but you said nobody had to cross the street, and then,
So that, well, not the.
Somebody has to cross
the
the-
entrance.
the
I mean,
entrance.
Park across the entrance and you walk back.
Yeah.
Certainly you're gonna,
Yeah.
okay?
Okay.
But most people probably will park inside and walk to the building is where they're gonna go.
Right.
They're gonna wanna go to the building.
Okay, so we're saying one specific designated spot for
pickup and
pickup,
drop-off.
drop-off, and parking of the shuttle vehicle.
Well, they're gonna park the shuttle at night wherever they want.
Right.
But
Right.
this is during the day, during when it's active.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can say drop-off and pick-up then. And then parking curbs at the rear of the gravel
Yep.
parking area? All right. And electrical conduit layout
Future
future-
electrical conduit for car chargers.
For car chargers, all right. That's not included here?
No, they don't have any underground electrical right now.
They don't? And how
I
come we
mean,
have
they
the
show,
chargers?
the designated chargers, but they don't show how they're powered, so.
So, okay, so to
But they-
show the electrical conduit layout under the
The applicant
underground.
has indicated that that's in process, and so.
Okay, great.
By
But we
asking
just
for
want
it,
it
they're just going to
shown.
provide it later, yeah.
Okay, we just want it shown.
All right. Now,
Great. So those are the 4 additional conditions. We've
about-
eliminated.
I'm sorry, what about all of Bob Duncanson's?
Okay, let's look at Bob Duncanson's. All right. So let's review Bob Duncanson's letter. I'll just read it. And this is from Dr. Duncanson, dated today. I reviewed the plan showing site modifications, C211 revised November 21, details C241 dated November 21, prepared by Coastal Engineering Company, site plan, etc., proposed site lighting plan, prepared by Catalyst, and supporting documents, and have the following comments. Point 1, the results of DOH 1, 2, and 3 are not shown. Point 2, CB1 appears to be a double grate on the site plan, but that is not reflected on the detail sheet.
I thought it was.
Okay, so,
it's on the plan.
Well, it's on the plan, but it's also designated by the size of it. It says 24 inches by 48 inches.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that's a double grate.
yeah, I could tell it was, but.
Yeah, right. So I saw it on the detail,
so,
But not a,
on a cascade.
right, not a cascade gate, just a regular, just squares, water go.
Right.
okay,
His comment later on about the cascade, Bob and I agree that that's not warranted for this location.
okay. So point 2, the planning board feels is satisfied, and the later comment, what number is it? Of the cascade,
Number 5, I think.
number 5. The board feels that consideration is satisfied, is that correct?
Right.
Right.
All right. Only one proposed turnaround at the west end is striped on the CEC site plan, while 2 are striped on the Catalyst site plan. So where is this that he's referring to?
Good question.
Yes, let's take a look at that. Proposed turnaround.
Hang with us, we're trying to get through it.
So here's the proposed.
Oh, yeah, the turnaround, right by the drainage, to the east of the west of the drainage.
In the southwest corner of the site. And
Yeah, that was,
So I think it's the striped space that's really at the northwest corner of the parking lot.
here.
right.
The striped space out by the sidewalk that leads out to Main
They're
Street.
both striped.
I think we had gotten an updated base plan
Okay,
that
so
did
it's
not
just an
have that striped out.
inconsistency.
You're right. The CAD plan that came through from Weston and Sampson, they had erased our cross-hatched area here on our plan. So that evaporated in between us and the EV people and you, Dave. But, to the committees, this is
So will it,
this area.
So,
But
so
we'll
what
add
should
the
it be?
cross-hatching back in there.
you're calling for both on both ends?
Yes.
Then 2?
Yes, on the architectural plan, we had,
Yeah,
I'll zoom in on the architectural plan. We had it cross-hatched in both
right.
empty, that's just in case a car comes into this dead-ended parking lot and has to make a K-turn to leave.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you want both of them just like your landscape plan shows?
Yeah, I think that's what Mr. Duncanson's asking for, yes.
Okay, so we just want to make sure that it's clarified on the site plan.
yeah. Okay, but we don't need to add that as a condition.
No, I don't think so.
No.
Thing is, the cobblestone curb flush with gravel, I don't,
Where are you now?
it's around the tree.
Oh, you're already at the 7?
Yeah.
Let's look at, let's look at point 4 first. Why don't we do that? Go through them systematically?
Oh,
Have we looked at that?
CB2.
In the southwest corner of the
yeah,
gravel?
we
That
already,
was discussed.
we already had
discussed
an
that,
answer to the
okay.
question that it is a low spot, and yes, it does need to be there.
Yes, okay, great.
So that's
So
done.
we're not eliminating it.
No.
Okay.
6 you've taken care of, right?
Yes.
Okay,
So now we're at the
so we are on
cobblestone.
7. Proposed cobblestone curb flush with gravel around the existing tree.
That's a norm. That's a norm. At the Nickerson House in North Chatham, that's not North Chatham. How about, that's almost in Harwich. Anyway, they have their parking outlined with cobbles at the height of the stone, and it works very well. It might be maybe a half an inch above the stone. So I'm sure that that's not going to be a problem.
All right. Point 8, there's a note to connect roof downspouts to CB1 using 6 DIA SCH 40 PVC. This shows lack of initiative when there are several grass areas around the building that could be used as rain gardens, as a landscape amenity and educational opportunity.
I personally disagree with where there could be rain gardens because they're going to be either in the front on the street
Right.
and people are going to be walking through there.
I would-
I don't think it's a good idea.
Right, I would leave that to the applicant. I don't know that it's a
And
requirement
personally,
from
I
a
don't-
site plan perspective.
I think the earth underneath is not suitable for
Right.
rain gardens.
But
good.
also, if I could interject, I think David would agree that if we could have, we would have, because that is the norm these days, right? But this whole lawn area here has a drainage, subsurface drainage structure
big
that
one.
takes on Main Street. So we just didn't have the site for it here.
No, it's a big one too. It's not a small one, so
Yeah.
that's a moot point. All right, light pole, no, what do we have?
Okay,
now?
next one is the site to be provided with underground electrical service from the
Yeah,
existing pole?
so we covered that
We
with one
covered
of our
that,
items.
yes, that we added a condition for that, correct?
Yep,
Number
Light
10
poles
we've
should be
done.
oriented to avoid spilling onto adjacent private property. I think that's covered in one of our standard conditions.
well, also with the adjustment of the light intensity too.
Okay.
have
All new
11.
plantings should utilize native low-water, low-fertilizer varieties.
You do know that we like native plants.
Yeah, and
Doesn't need to be added as a condition.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. So I think we have 6 conditions as stated previously.
Yep.
Everyone's all set with that? And then what we need is a motion to approve this formal site
wanna
plan
make it that?
with the 6 conditions as stated.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Great. So Bob Wertschafter,
Bob Wetcher, approve.
Art Spru,
Art Sprue, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
Bob
Bob Dubus, approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve this formal site plan with the 6 conditions as stated. Thank you very much. It's been rather a long meeting, and we do appreciate you bearing with us.
Thanks for being
Thank you.
patient with us.
thank you for your help.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yes. Thanks for all your good
Bye-bye.
work. Thank you. All right. So just one, it is pretty late. There's just chairman's comments. We just wanted to briefly discuss the schedule. Our next meeting is December 12th. We'll be hoping that we'll receive some comments from town council regarding the West Chatham Neighborhood Center, the wording on the draft with respect to the treatment of the RPZ, and also staff will do as much as possible to integrate the board's comments from this evening so the board can review that next draft. But we probably should expect that we won't have what we call a final draft till the first meeting of January for the West Chatham Neighborhood Center. Yeah, Katie, did you want to comment on the schedule going forward for that?
Sure, and again, I think that that's, all dependent on the board coming to final decisions at the meeting on the 12th.
Yes.
So if we were to have those final decisions, we would be able to incorporate that into a revised working draft for consideration. And then we can work with the board if we'd like to have a public input session, as we've done in the past. We've had one public input session last December, so if the board would like to have another based on the boundaries as well as the revisions that are made, we can talk about what that would look like, but that would be sometime in January. But what we'll also do is try to work back that timeline so that we know how much time we have, when we need to bring
Yes.
it to the select board, so that we can get it before town meeting with the appropriate deadlines being met.
Yeah. So
Madam
December
Chairman.
12th, we want to
Okay, the
wrap
12th,
this up.
that's January 12th?
No, December 12th, our next.
Oh, okay,
meet-
no, I
our
meant
next
on
meeting,
January. I'm going to miss, I think, the latter.
The latter meeting. in
Latter
Chatham
meeting. I should be here for the first meeting.
In January. Okay, good. But the point is, in the December 12th meeting, we, in essence, would like to hope that the board can come to conclusions about what we feel is the quote-unquote final draft, remembering that it is going to be vetted before the public. And then Katie will review with us what the schedule has to be in order to process everything in time for annual town meeting 2024. And we'll take a look at that schedule and decide if we feel that we can meet it. Okay? All right. Yes, Arthur?
But generally, we're still going to probably be beginning the first of the year, the second and fourth Mondays, right? Generally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and so, again, as you'll recall, there are certain times when the Board of Health has requested us begin meeting at 5:30. When there is a Monday holiday and they can't meet on their regularly scheduled first or third Mondays, they tend to move to the weeks that the planning board meets. They begin their meetings at 3 o'clock, and they try to end by 5, and then that half hour gives the transition for Channel 18 to be able to transition from one live meeting to another. We'll certainly have to look at that timing. Also, when we're considering long-range planning, if we're going to be
Yeah.
meeting at 4 PM, we can see if, the availability of the small meeting room, if that's available, but we can.
Yes,
We
maybe
can have
that's-
those discussions and see what that looks like. But I don't believe, we'll get the schedule out to you in the next meeting packet for what the dates are for the
Yes.
meetings next year. And I think that we already know which meetings we would have to begin late, and that should be marked on that meeting schedule as well.
Okay, great. Sounds
So we're
good.
meeting at 4 on the 12th?
On
Yes.
December 12th, we're meeting at 4, yeah, in this big room.
In the big room,
Yeah.
yes.
And also, we'll just mention, hasn't been formally announced yet, but apparently we will be getting a new principal planner soon, who will be joining us for the December 12th meeting. And there will be a public announcement made about that soon. So I just wanted to let you know. Okay,
Thanks.
great. Great. So then I think we need a motion to
I move
adjourn
to
the-
adjourn.
I second.
All right, Bob Dubus.
I'm for it.
Okay, Lauren Chain,
Warren Chain approved.
Art Spru,
Arts approve.
Bob
Um,
Wirtschaf.
I'll work after approve.
And this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve. It looks like it's, I can't read the clock. 7:39. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for participating, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.